So, welcome everyone. Uh, really appreciate you joining us on a Sunday afternoon. We've got an exciting event lined up for today. We've got high-end Irish whiskey tasting from Pernod Ricard, specifically their single pot still whiskeys from the Midleton Distillery that we're going to go through today. Uh, we're recording this. I've got the chat function going for everybody. A lot of, I think, new faces or new members in over the last year or two that might be joining us for an event for the first time. So if you don't know me, personally, I'm Allan Dwyer, president of the Irish Whiskey Society America. So welcome to any first timers. And I think you're going to find that we're going to have a fun day as well as an educational day. We've got a couple of experts, brand ambassadors from Pernod that are going to walk us through the lineup of whiskeys as well as give us some history and insight as to the brands and how single pot still whiskey is made. So we'll we'll be doing the whiskeys kind of along the way, but before we do that, um, I thought I would just kick things off. I did send an email earlier, try to give you guys a heads up to do a little kickoff toast. So, and I recommended that you pick something from the Midleton Distillery range. Uh, Personally, I'm going with the 10-year-old Green Spot, the 100-year anniversary that came out last year. So if people want to share what they're doing in the chat, that's great. But um, again, welcome everyone and Sláinte. Getting old. You need the glasses to read the chat function.
Yeah.
But all right, so having I think got the some of the logistics out of the way, why don't we I'm going to turn it over to the two people that are going to be leading us today through this. We have Joe Nichol and Jameson Cook from Pernod Ricard. So I'll just turn things over to Joe, to you first, and let you introduce you guys and take it from there.
Of course, man. Thank you, Alan. I saw a couple of tasty things there in the chat. I'm liking the collection some of you guys have out there. I too reached for an earlier batch of Redbreast 12 cask strength, so great minds think alike to whoever had in the chat. I guess a quick introduction. I am a member. I know I don't hop in that WhatsApp as often as I wish I could, but I am a member of the Irish Whiskey Society as well. So it's really cool to not only be in the club with you guys, but be able to share a moment today and teach about some of the brands that we love. I'm also a member of the Irish Whiskey Society Dublin chapter as well. So whenever I'm overseas, I like to kind of hop in and see what activity they're up to too. But there's two of us here today. Jameson Cook, he is the brand manager. He's one of our brand managers that works on our high-end whiskey portfolio for the United States, which is a big job. A lot of states to cover, a lot of drinkers in the United States. It's the largest drinking country for that category, so it's a big job to do. He's in here today mostly to just kind of guide the deck for me so I can speak without having to click and worry about where I'm at. But he is here too. Happy to have him along. But for myself, we'll get into my slide real quick just to lend a little bit of legitimacy. You guys are probably already wondering where the heck is this guy's Irish accent? I know. Technically, my great grandmother was Irish, but we know that we don't play that game. And my grandma, who's like half blind, she thinks like Colin Farrell. Guy's Irish. So if you close your eyes really tight and barely look at the screen, maybe you see him too. But if we scroll down to my page, if we just go down a couple to my page, I just want to talk a little bit about myself real quick so you guys can hear a little bit about what I've done in my career. But I started in high-end restaurant and cocktails and for a long time. I'm in my 40s now, but I was fortunate enough to have a pretty fun career. I made cocktails for the whole country, and I got to win some fun awards representing some pretty cool brands along the way. I've ran some bars, I've owned a bar, I've designed some fun bars and some other businesses out there in the U.S. too. From that career, I went on into distillation. If you live in the East, you may have heard of something called Sutler's Gin. It is a pot still gin, small batch, and we did everything all the way up to bottling by hand. And I was a part of that team too, making gin and bottling gin. And we went on to win gold at the San Francisco Spirit Awards twice. So I'm pretty proud of that achievement as well. And bartending and distilling got me into talking about spirits and being a published writer for a couple of different spirit forums, a couple of cocktail magazines, and I'm even in a couple of cocktail books, which is kind of neat.
But just there's 4 or 5 that I can't see that are on.
Joe, you need to unmute.
Just a reminder for people, and if you're just joining on, to please keep yourself muted so we don't catch the background noise.
Thanks, guys. I'll remember to unmute myself anytime you have to remute the class, Alan. And then into education, Irish Whiskey Academy there in Cork. I have the Irish Whiskey Academy Advanced Cert, even the Edinburgh Whiskey Academy Advanced Cert 2, and of course the WSET 3. These are all fun high-level certs to kind of work on your whiskey game, your spirit game, if you ever wanted to take anything like that for yourself. They're pretty fun. And of course, in the sherry world, we love sherry because we use sherry in virtually everything that we use at the distillery, sans some of the Midleton stuff. And I also have my advanced song over there from Jerez, Spain. The Irish Whiskey Academy famously is only done over in Cork. It's an in-person academy, but we recently, as of last year, launched a domestic academy, and I am the host and educator over here, where we take 50 bartenders every half and give them a 6-week crash course on the course they would have taken in person, and then the top scorers get to go to Ireland with me and have a little bit of fun and learn in person. So I know I might not be Irish, but I promise you guys I love my whiskey as much as you guys, and I'm happy to be here to talk all about it with you. And now, if we move on to the next slide, as you guys probably thought when you saw the lineup come your way in an email or when the box showed up to your house, holy crap, that's a cool lineup. And I couldn't agree more. You have a really rare expression of Redbreast Moscatel, and then we have 4 other expressions that clock in over $250, $300 a bottle. This is a really fun portfolio. This is something that I probably would use at a big whiskey event, like a trade show in a breakout room. So that's kind of the train of thought I wanted to take this class in. I wanted to give you a condensed version of what you would take at the academy, or maybe something I would present at a whiskey club, because you guys all love whiskey. You're big fans of Irish whiskey, and I imagine you're fans of whiskey beyond Irish. And I love to get into the why. Like, the why do we like this stuff? Why does it taste like this? So hopefully you bear with me, because we're going to get a little nerdy, and I want to get into the grain, fermentation, distillation, maturation. We're going to have fun, and we're going to taste along the way. And of course, questions all in the chat. If it's something pertinent, Alan's going to flag it and we'll ask it live. If it's something for later, then we're going to cover those things later. And I'm just going to front load this too on this next slide here. This is just a reminder of how we're going to taste. You guys have done plenty of these, but that way we don't have to stop and reassess this every single time. When we do get to a whiskey that we're going to taste, definitely observe that color, because the color tells all about that whiskey's journey, especially when it comes to maturation. And so I want you to think about that when we get to that whiskey. And also I want you to take a big nose, right? A little ortho-nasal. We love to get way up in that thing. I want you to get a couple of deep smells. And then of course, retro-nasal is important too. That's the way it smells when it's in our mouths or as we swallow. That olfactory nerve is working. And then after you swallow, give a nice exhale out your nose, put that olfactory nerve into overtime, and then of course assess the texture, because the texture is going to be different as we go into different barrels. And when we get to the Midleton Very Rare, it technically is about 20% corn distillate, so that is a blend, and it'll be neat to assess these differences and assess the color, the aroma, and the texture and the taste as we go. But you guys are veterans at this, so we're no strangers. So let's get into our heritage. And not just our heritage, because if we talk about Redbreast, we can only go back to 1910. And without sherry barrels and the Gibley brothers importing wine, we wouldn't have Redbreast, and that only gets us back to 80s. Of course, we need John Jameson, who filled those barrels, but John Jameson only gets us to 1780. You guys see where I'm going with this. We got to go back because I'm tired of people saying Irish whiskey is a subcategory. Technically, it's the category, and I want to dive in a little bit more as to why historically. So here's a couple images that are on your screen now. It's a little timeline. I'm going to take us back a little far, but not too far. For those of us that love booze, love wine, love the history of all these things, we can trace booze all the way back to 1200 BC, but that's a whole other class. I can't cover all these centuries in 60 minutes. But along the way, as civilizations rise and fall and different practices and sciences and philosophers come into play, we learn how to distill over time. The biggest breakthrough is in the 9th century, and we have the Golden Empire, the rise of the Persian Empire, and this is where we get algebra and chemistry and all these fun sciences. And at the end of the day, whiskey is algebra and chemistry in a bottle. We all know that. But what's cool to me, and what is the big difference for Irish whiskey and for whiskey in general, is that until 1405, nobody was distilling recreationally. All these stills, all these alembic stills that were going around monastic sites and monasteries, they were being used for science. They were being used for tinctures and tonics and medicines. And no one had really thought to distill it to a point where it was safely to drink recreationally. So two amazing things that Ireland did for us. If we go to Central Ireland, right on the Shannon River, just south Central Ireland, we're going to find ourselves in what is now called County Offaly. And we are going to be at a monastic site called Clonmacnoise. And if you've been there, it's gorgeous. It's one of the most gorgeous monastic sites in Ireland if you've ever done a nice road trip to go see all these things. So we are in 1405, and we have recreational distillation for the first time. And also for the first time, somebody questioned grapes, because all these European distillates that were going into science were all grape distillate. And grapes don't grow very well in Ireland. And so they thought, why don't we use what's in our backyard? And we have the birth of recreational distillation and the birth of grain spirits, period. That is incredibly cool and incredibly important, because from there, these monks would venture back out into mainland Europe, have these new tactics, these new sciences, these new templates, if you will, to teach everyone else how they did it. And now people can use fermentable products in their own backyard. And so we get Scotch whiskey, which we all love. When they go back into mainland Europe, we get something called Jenever. Jenever becomes gin. We get schnapps. Schnapps will go on to be vodka. We get aquavit, which is a cool caraway, kind of almost like a Norwegian gin, if you will. And then, of course, super important, as we're getting into the 17th century, they're all coming over to what is now America. And all these Scottish and Irish immigrants are bringing over knowledge of said distillation. And we have rye everywhere in Maryland and Pennsylvania. And of course, we get into Canada, where there's more rye and wheat. And the big one here, of course, as we get further south and further west, is corn. And to me, it can't go unsaid enough, but Irish whiskey deserves its flowers because they started it all. That is why I think Irish whiskey is the category and not a subcategory. It's easy to forget history. But let's fast forward a little bit, because even though we have whiskey in the 1405 in the 15th century, we don't really have rules and regulations, and we still have to tighten things up. And with that comes taxation and comes some laws along the way. So on this next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about the origins of Redbreast. We don't have Redbreast, like I said earlier, with the Gibley brothers and without John Jameson. This is not a John Jameson class, but I will say John Jameson came over from Scotland in 1780. He came over very connected with a lot of money from a family of Scottish distillers. He was able to set up shop right downtown in Dublin. And a few years later, we also get Powers, two massive families. Powers, I would say, was probably the home team favorite, while Jameson was the global export king. And then we get the relationship a little bit later. But before we get into 1857, what's also important about 1780 and 1785 is in 1780, there was a new tax imparted by the king. You were no longer taxed on what you made. You were taxed on what you could make if you were working full time, operating that still nonstop, which is kind of unfair. And unfortunately, a lot of our smaller distillers and smaller families were affected by that. But on the flip side of that, distilleries like Powers And Jameson were set up for success because they could distill at the rate that the king was asking. And then in 1785 is where we get our first distinctive separation, if you will. Until 1785, Ireland was primarily single malts, which is kind of interesting to think about. And there are some gorgeous ones out there. I'm sure some of you have some in your collections that I love that are out there in Ireland. So in 1785, as if the king wasn't collecting enough taxes as it is, he says, I'm going to tax you on your malt. And they are just not in the financial situation to afford more taxes. So to stick it to the king, and out of financial necessity, they decide, I guess we'll malt half of it. We'll malt some. And so we decided to go the route of 60-40 for our distillery's purposes, that is, to save a little bit of money on taxes. And what would happen was we would get single pot still as a category. And now we have really separated ourselves from what single malt Scotch is like. And we also held on to the pot still when we started to see column still distillation happening a little bit more often in Scotland. So we're holding on to the triple pot still, and we're holding on to the single pot still style of Irish whiskey. And then later on, in 1857, which is during the heyday of Irish whiskey, I don't know if you guys know this, but from the 1800s, almost all the way up until Prohibition, really, Irish whiskey was king. Single pot still Irish whiskey was 25% of global consumption, which is crazy to think about in a world now dominated by vodka and tequila and canned cocktails. Once upon a time, it was actually single pot still Irish whiskey. Socialites, presidents, leaders, and everyone alike was drinking the stuff. Jameson was the number one exported whiskey in the world. Now, we get rum into play, the East India Trade Company, and you can distill sugar just about anywhere in the world. So eventually rum does kind of come in and give Irish whiskey a run for its money. But it's pretty cool to think about Irish whiskey being the king for a while. And this is where we also get the Gibley brothers. They come into play. They're Walter and Albert Gibley. And on their return from the Crimean War, they established a wine merchant business in London. This business would take off. They specialized in fine wine from South Africa that very quickly turned into worldly wine and fine European wines. This is a time where now we're so spoiled, right? We go to the store, we pick up our wine, and it's all got pretty labels, and it tells us all the information that we need to know. It's wonderful. But in this time, you actually had to buy the wine by the barrel, and then you would do everything else yourself. You had to come up with your own label, you had to put it in your own bottle, and you sold it yourself. There's pros and cons to that. But one of the pros to that is that now these barrels are yours. And so why not make more money off the wine barrel that you already paid for? And that is exactly how that relationship kind of starts. You guys have probably heard of Nichol and Sons. They were a very similar style of family. They were fine wine merchants and also a confectionery shop. They specifically sold wine and confectionery to the royal family. So Mitchell and Sons make spots, of course, that we love. But Mitchell and Sons and Gibley brothers would have been two in the same, working in kind of a little bit different. One was for the masses and one was for super high end. So that's where these guys come into play, is they would take their empty wine barrels and they would send them down to John Jameson. And there's plenty of whiskey to go around. There's plenty of whiskey to fill up the merchant's barrels. And then they send it back to the shop. And then they would bottle it themselves. So Gibley's looking to make the most of their inventory, essentially. Fill up these barrels at Bow Street, bring them back to their warehouse, and they would put the spirit in these seasoned casks. And they would sell it under a new brand. And the distilleries at first weren't happy about this, because at first you didn't have to put the distillery's name on the bottle. That would eventually change, because you can't sell Jameson or Power Spirit without them getting a little bit of credit. So a couple of years went by of not getting name dropped on it, and it was called Grand Whiskey Spirits. But eventually you would see it be called Redbreast J&J. So you knew who bottled it and you knew who made it. That way it was a little bit more transparent, and they couldn't go around claiming they were Jameson when it did say Jameson on the bottle. So that takes us to 1875 real quick. The Gilbeys held the largest stock of whiskey outside of the distilleries. The largest stock, 83,000 cases of Irish whiskey and 38,000 cases of Scotch. That's a massive liquor store. It's like walking into one of these big super liquor stores we have in the States. These guys went from a tiny little wine shop in London to having shops all over the UK that were massive. And they were still selling wine too. So they still had their wine side, and they also had the whiskey side of the business, which is pretty neat. that is going to get us into our first sip. I thought this was a good place to break because without the Gibley brothers, we don't have fine wines. And we're going to sip on a new expression of ours that is exactly that. It is Redbreast aged in a fine wine. Now, I'm going to cover why it tastes like this as we go along. When we get into the grain and we get into the science of it all, we'll get there. So I encourage you not to drink it all. I encourage you to get in there and get those nasals, get those nasal, those ortho and retro nasal working up. And I'm going to do it with you too. I have my Muscatel here. And then in a little bit, we'll talk about why it tastes like this, talk about sherry. But for starters, you probably wonder, maybe why did I start with this? I went in the order that I thought, or really Allan and I both, we talked yesterday about how we wanted to do this. We were, what order do we want to go in so we don't just completely wreck your palate and then we lose the nuance of one of these whiskeys. So to me, it made the most sense that we did Muscatel. And that's because the Muscatel grape, and it famously is very aromatic and very floral. I don't know if you guys ever drink Moscato or drink Muscatel wine, but the way that grape ferments, as opposed to Pedro Jimenez grape, it's way up top. It's way in your nose. It's way in the front. And so I thought that if we tasted 4 whiskeys or tasted a few and then went to Muscatel, I thought that we would lose it. So the big thing I want to take away from this is how aromatic this one is. I'm sure you guys have a few expressions of Redbreast at the house. I have them all as well, and there is nothing quite like this one. It's very much up front. Muscatel gives off these jasmine and clementine and blossom notes. So get in there and afraid to get a couple of big whiffs. It is 92 proof, so we're starting a little hot, but your palate will warm up. I have faith in you. But it is gorgeous. Take some time. We'll take some time with it. I do encourage you to you guys probably do this anyways, but try not to drink it all. Let's save a little bit so we can revisit things and kind of see how, as our palate warms up to all these proofs and all these different flavors, it's fun to revisit things and see if our palate catches anything else maybe. But this is the newest expression, and I would imagine some of you guys have this bottle, right? Not just the sample that we provided, but I know only so many cases came to the States and only so many cities got some of those spirits. But hopefully, if you live in certain cities, you're able to have access to a Muscatel. Or maybe the next time you find yourself over there, you grab yourself a bottle of it. It's very gorgeous. Man. No, it's so a little awkward to taste whiskey and not have anyone telling you how delicious it is, but that's the nature of these kinds of calls. But hopefully, I'm imagining.
It's fantastic.
Good, yeah. I'm
And
hoping that you guys are thinking that. Yeah.
But also, as you go through the series of the different, like this, you don't see Muscatel a lot out there, and it's just such a unique, and I think it was balanced really well.
It spends quite a few months in here, a year and a half. And with Listau and some of our other finishes, it doesn't really take that long. We decided to go a year and a half because that's just kind of what Dave McCabe was playing with. He was trying to find that perfect expression, that perfect finish, and that's just the time that it took. You know, some of these expressions are much shorter than that. You look at the triple series with Jameson, it's only like a 6-month finish in these virgin European oaks. But Muscatel, he thought that maybe 18 months was the secret sauce, and then we put it in a bottle, and I thought he was dead on. This is gorgeous. So
I think Joe, you're gonna regret saying that because the first whiskey. Once we get to 4 and 5, you're probably not going to be able to get people to shut up. So they're going to loosen up.
Okay.
How many months was it finished in the Muscatel?
18 months.
Got it. Thank
you. Yeah. All right, so let's get back into the story. Keep sipping that thing, keep enjoying it, and we're going to get to another whiskey before we know it. So let's get back to really Redbreast and how it kind of came into be. We're going to go back to 1912, and this is the first time a reference to the brand name appeared. And you guys probably know the story. It's a little fun and romantic. The chairman, member of the Gibley family at the time, was an avid bird watcher, and he wanted to name 3 whiskey expressions after 3 birds. He wanted to name one the Yellowhammer, which honestly, that's a pretty cool whiskey name. And then he wanted to name one the Chaffinch, not so much. And he wanted to name one after the Robin Redbreast. So they didn't really give him all 3 wishes, but they gave him one. And so he was allowed to name one expression after a bird. And here we are today at Redbreast. And the Robin Redbreast is the only bird that you can see all year long singing and flying through all 4 seasons. And I think that's pretty cute and that's fun. And I do think the name is perfect because you look at the color of that Redbreast robin's chest, you look at some of these whiskeys after they spent some time in sherry, it is a very similar reddish orange hue. I kind of see where he was going with that. Maybe one day we'll get Kevin O'Gorman to launch a Yellowhammer because that just sounds like a cool whiskey. So this drink was introduced to the masses. You wouldn't have seen it much outside of Dublin, though. It was kind of a underground cult classic. It was even called the priest tipple at one point. I guess in those times. I'm not familiar with living in Ireland or living in the 1910s of Ireland. But when the priest would come by to pray with your family or to break bread or open the Bible and share some passages, it was often encouraged that you gave him a tipple of your best stuff. And that was typically Redbreast from what we have seen and what we have heard through the stories of Redbreast. I think that's kind of neat that, the most revered person coming into your household apparently deserved a little bit of Redbreast, and that's pretty cool. Interesting to think of Redbreast drinkers as just like a exclusive club because now it's available to everybody and we get to share this liquid with all of you. But so by the late 1960s, as we all know, a lot of things happen. You guys probably see how I jumped all the bad times. I know we're going to talk about it. It could have its own slide for sure. But quarter of global consumption, hundreds of distilleries. We get prohibition. We lose the biggest buyer of Irish whiskey. And we have the War of Independence. And when you get the War of Independence, we love freedom and we get to break off of the crown. But what does the crown do? It slaps you on the hand and cuts you off a British Commonwealth. So now you lose everything else. And really important, that was you lost Canada. A lot of people were continuing to smuggle, as we know, through Canada into the States, and people continue to party all through Prohibition. We couldn't even do that. So we really were landlocked with the few remaining distilleries. And you couple that with, of course, World War I and World War II and the grain shortages and the fuel shortages going through the next couple of decades, it spelled a bad time for Irish whiskey. And we go from a quarter of global consumption and hundreds of distilleries in the Republic of Ireland to 3 and less than 1% of people drinking Irish whiskey, which is just crazy to think about. Like it's such a quick time to have a spiraling downfall. It's really unfortunate, and for the Irish, and not just on the whiskey side. This is economically, this is for a lot of their exports and imports. It was a tough time, but we bounced back, and we bounced back together. One of our big things at Pernod Ricard is conviviality. It's working together, and it's what they did. Powers and Jameson and Cork Distillery Company, they joined forces, and Cork Distillery Company would take everybody in at a little distillery in Midleton, where a guy by the name of Max Crockett was the master distiller. And so everybody joins forces to try to bring whiskey back to life. We're going to CPR Irish whiskey and try to save it. And I think that's pretty neat because these families famously didn't really like each other, especially the Powers and the Jamesons. There's some fun stories in the archives, very Peaky Blinders sounding stories of like bar fights and stuff between the two families. But they joined forces, put their differences aside, and try to bring Irish whiskey back to life. Do that because we can fast forward and we can see where we are now, and we make up over 80% of the Irish whiskey market. So Jameson and Powers, once upon a time, dominated the market. They were able to survive and be resilient through those times, joined forces with Max Crockett. We get the creation of Midleton whiskey in 1984, and we bring Redbreast and Spot along for the journey. And of course, we have other brands too there that we make, like Method of Madness, Castle. But we do this as a team, and we lift each other up, and we get back on the market. And so now we are back on top and still innovating, still doing wonderful things. And in the 1980s, you see Barry Crockett take the helm from Max Crockett, and he looks into, this part's important because when we get into Midleton, it's much different, and we're about to after this slide. This is a time where American oak hadn't really been explored because up until the Prohibition in 1933, we get a rule about virgin American oak, and you can no longer continue to abuse these barrels because whiskey was unregulated until then. And now there's a plethora of barrels out there, and the Scottish and the Irish take note of that, and they really start diving into this American oak species of barrels, and this char and what this carbon layer is doing to their whiskey, and they really fall in love with it, especially Barry Crockett. He loved it so much that he wanted to make expressions that were strictly ex-bourbon, and that's what he did. So up until this point, we were predominantly Barry, and then we start experimenting and playing with ex-bourbon, and then now here we are in 2026. And most of our spirits, unless it says like single cask or something, the backbone of most of our products are going to be ex-bourbon casks. The Jameson line, the Redbreast line, the Spot line, the Midleton line, predominantly like over 50% of the blend in the bottle, you're looking at ex-bourbon. We love what that Char 3, what that American oak lignin and those flavors are doing to the base of our DNA and our whiskey. And of course, highlighting those notes with beautiful wine and sherry notes. So as a little nod to this gentleman here, Mr. Barry Crockett, we are going to dive into Midleton Very Rare, which is crazy to say that this is what we're drinking as sip number 2, because what an awesome whiskey. Midleton Very Rare was something that was created by Barry Crockett, and it's different every year. As you guys know, it's called the vintage release, the Irish whiskey, and it's really up to the master distiller. This is one of the babies of the master distiller that he gets to kind of say what casks he's going to be putting into this. This is all first fill or second fill ex-bourbon. Sorry about that. I live in Chicago. I get horns a lot. This is all ex-bourbon, first fill, second fill. We're looking at fairly old whiskey. This is 12 to 33-year-old whiskey. And a lot of it is much higher than 12. We have to say 12, of course, because that's like the youngest thing that we're putting in this blend. But it's mostly older stuff. And it's gorgeous, and it's only 22,500 bottles a year, as you guys can see, which sounds like a lot, but that's globally. That's not a ton. And we're actually fortunate enough to be drinking 2023 today, which I think is pretty cool because we're up to 2026, and we're going to splash back a couple of years. And this is going to be Kevin O'Gorman's first bottling of Midleton. This is after Brian Nation left and Kevin O'Gorman took the reins. He got promoted up from the maturation warehouse, and we are drinking his first Midleton vintage release. We're going to go down in proof a little bit. So we're going to go back to 80. We were at 92. It's going to be a little bit softer, but I really want you to take your time with this too, because this is all ex-bourbon, and this is about 20% of column distillate, corn column distillate, and 80% pot still. And with the corn column distillate, you're getting lighter floral notes, and it's going to lend itself to the body of this. Another big thing that we'll see later when we're talking about production is this is very light and medium pot still when it comes to Midleton. When it comes to Redbreast, we do use a little bit of fusel oils, which is something that is captured in the tails. There's a little bit of the heavier pot still distillate. That's what gives it that big old bold flavor, that viscosity and that spice. But we're trying to keep it to light and medium pot still. So when you take light and medium pot still and you take 20% of light floral corn distillate, and then you put it into ex-bourbon for 12 to 33 years and then combine them all, this is what you get. And this is a gorgeous expression. It's had its fair share of awards, as we all know. This is hard to get. This is a whiskey collector item here. I know people out there trying to collect the whole series. If you did, I can't imagine what that would cost. I did just see it unopened 1987, I believe it was, go for like $110,000. So they don't play around with this stuff. Pretty crazy, but right away the nose is completely different, as you guys are probably knowing and picking up already. It smells like I'm smelling a refined bourbon. I get a ton of that American oak up front. I have my suggested tasting notes here on the slide, of course, but I want you to think for yourself and have your own notes because we all have our own palates. But for me, I get almost like stewed apples and vanilla and honeycomb. Of course, those oak notes and some spice notes too in there. But it's so lovely on the nose, and it's drinks so light and delicate. Man. Feel free to shout at me. I know you guys are loving it. Let me know if you like it. Just give me a little something. It's awkward, tasting whiskey by yourself.
they're out there. They're just all speechless.
Yeah, it's so good. Typically, if we were in a class together hanging out, I'd be asking you guys, "Is the first time you ever had it? How many do you have at home?" And we kind of work the room a little bit, but we'll save that for the end. I'm excited to hear about what you think and your collections and stuff. But
A question, Joe, came up about the mash bill
yeah,
percentages between grain and pot still on this
yeah,
one.
yeah, we're gonna go. I'll at the Liberty, I will tell you 80-20. Yeah, so we'll go 80 pot still and 20, and all of grain distillate's going to go through a column still. And then, of course, our apostle distillate is unmalted and malted barley, 60 unmalted, 40 malted, and that's going to go through our mashing, milling, fermentation, and triple pot still.
Can you go into some of the differences, or if you can, between some of the single pot still? Like, how do they make them different? Is it the distillation or just the mash bill?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because you're queuing me up because that is exactly what we get into after this.
Nice.
But yes, my gosh, the nuances. I hear people say like, how could there be another whiskey? There's already enough whiskey on the market. You see another whiskey and you're like, oh my gosh, stop already. We're at the beginning of whiskey. And when you look at the long scale of things, like we went back to 1405, this is centuries ago. We're looking at the grand scale of things. We're at the beginning of innovation and maturation. We just started playing with American oak, 50 years ago. Like that's pretty wild. We're still exploring different kinds of cask and muscatel for the first time in 2025. Very excited to see where mash bills and maturation go in the future. There are some whiskeys out there that are doing some phenomenal things. Not just us. There are some amazing distilleries out there that I'm big fan of.
And no Irishman ever said there's too much whiskey out there.
Exactly.
What's the kind of underlying vision of a very rare versus like what's calling something a very rare vintage versus just a one-off release from the Midleton Distillery?
Good question. Very rare, and maybe Jameson can speak to this too. But very rare is something that. So while it's different every year, it's a continuation of a project. So we've titled it that. Midleton Very Rare is the name of the spirit, and then each year is a different bottling. When we do a one-off, it wouldn't be called Midleton. It wouldn't be called a vintage release. Like I've seen some pretty cool stuff out there. I just tasted 37-year-old single grain from Midleton that Kevin brought over on one of his trips. And there's all kinds of fun stuff like that are one-offs, or that we do like a small amount of. Like you guys might have seen that Midleton 40th anniversary bottle that came out last year, 2024, 2025, and it was 40-year-old release, finished in tawny port, and it was a collection of all these different casks. Only 560 or so of those were made. Ended up being like 20 grand a pop. But there are one-offs that will have their own special bottle, special marketing behind them all. But I guess the roundabout way to answer your question is we call it this. This is what they decided to call it in 1984, and this is what has always stayed. So it's kind of a nod to Barry Crockett to continue to make this distiller selected whiskey, which is pretty neat.
So this comes out every year, and I wonder, what do they try to do? Do they try for consistency of flavor? What's the difference year? What do they do?
Quite the opposite. So Barry Crockett comes out every year, and it's 2,500 bottles each year, and it's as close to the same bottle each time. They're actually trying to do different expressions with this. They're selecting different barrels. They don't want the every year to taste the same. They are looking for nuance. So they're looking at maybe there's more first fill than second fill, or maybe there's a little bit more pot still in one. Maybe one's 85-15, maybe one's 78-22, and maybe there's a little bit more first fill or second fill. And when you use a second fill cask, there's not as much wood influence on that second fill because it's been used a few times. So they are really trying to stay in the lane of this like fine, regarded whiskey that's going to cost $250 and up. They want to stay in that luxury range, of course, and make something that's deliverable. But at the same time, they want it to be a little bit different. They want you to want to collect them and taste them side by side, which is fun to do. So
is it always going to be ex-bourbon, or are they going to do they
Yeah.
put other things in there? Okay.
Yeah, at least they have for this long. If they plan on changing that, I don't think so. I don't know the answer 100% though, but it's always been a nod to Barry loving ex-bourbon, and it's been a nod to him collecting the finer casks in the warehouse and then making his own blend of ex-bourbon between barley and corn spirit. And so we've kept that tradition alive through the distillers we've had ever since. And that's been like the theme behind it. There are other Midletons that come out that have other influences, like the Barry Crockett and the Derek Gaelics and the Foray de Trancé, and there's all these other higher end expressions where we will play around with other things. But as far as Midleton Very Rare, I believe that is Midleton Very Rare's path. Very, very much on that path of ex-bourbon, first and second fill, and an array of barrels based on the distiller's thought process that year.
Happy to. You're all over it, Joe. I can jump in briefly. I know there was a couple questions in the chat, but just to speak to what you were speaking to in the previous questions as well.
Sure.
So as far as like the vintage release goes, I think the previous question was about like making it a very rare vintage release. So Midleton Very Rare would be like the brand name, and then the vintage release would be the specific SKU. So we're not trying to call this like each vintage release very rare in and of itself, but obviously like across the whole portfolio, that's just what we are as a brand. And then to talk more specifically about some of the vintages themselves, Kate, I know you had a question about like if it's the same each and every year. So Kevin, our master distiller, was in town a couple months ago. Fantastic to get to chat with him. It's basically up to him at the end of the day, which is a fun kind of project for him to mix things up from year to year. He kind of laughed when we talked about it, but it was, it's kind of at his discretion to see how similar or how different that he wants to make it from year over year. And then lastly, I did see in the chat about the 24 and 25 releases. We're working on our end, the 24 and 25, and then eventually the 26 will be here in the US. So keep your eyes out for that. We are running down towards the very last couple hundred cases of the Midleton Very Rare 2023 vintage release at the moment. So if it is something that you like, I would encourage you to get a bottle before they're gone. But once that is depleted, we will move on to the 2024, trying to avoid some confusion with having multiple yearly vintages in market at the same time. So get your 2023 while you can, but the 24 and 25 will be coming, followed by the 26. So we're hoping to make that jump sooner rather than later.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, that's we've talked about, crash course in history, a little bit about the brand history. We've had two beautiful whiskeys. Let's get into the next phase of this thing. And somebody propped me up perfectly asking about the mash bills, and we're going to get into that. So why did we go here? In the 60s, we could have gone to Jameson. Jameson was massive. We could have gone to Powers. Was massive. There were multiple city blocks, hundreds of employees. We wanted to kind of find a place where we could grow together. And what better place to do that than to find ourselves in the Southeast and just be amongst the barley and right next to the ocean, ideally located with water on site, and also plenty of land to continue to grow, because they had a vision in 1966 that they would build a new distillery in 1975 and call it New Midleton. And that's exactly what they did. And we're growing. We're still growing. We're adding things all the time. There's construction there right now, actually. I'll be there in a few weeks, and I'll see where they are, and I'll report back to you guys in the group chat. But it is a tiny town. If you guys have ever been, I imagine quite a few of you have. We're all big fans. Middleton town is in County Cork. It is only 2.2 square miles, and there's about 9,000 people. It is pretty tiny. But that is where, funny enough, the mecca of Irish whiskey lies. And it's pretty neat. If you saw, I usually show this in the chat or in one of my slides because it's kind of funny. But when you go to the visitor center of Midleton, it's like a little tiny map. It's just a couple blocks. You can do it in a half a day. And the only two things that are name dropped on it are the distillery and then a McDonald's at the bottom. I think that's kind of funny that it's the only two things they bothered to brand on the map. I guess after a night of a lot of Jameson, McDonald's does taste pretty good in the morning, so I kind of see where they're coming from. But anyways, we move on. So we have the Dungourney River right on site, and then we have barley all over the Southeast, and we use barley within 200 kilometers. And we use local farms, and we also in first farms for sustainable practices. We work very closely, and we award farms that treat their farms with a sustainable practice. And then we take a lot of our leftover stuff and we put it back out into the farms for feed for the animals. So, well, you can't exactly be carbon free or carbon neutral at a distillery of that size. You can do your best. So the little bits here and there count. So let's get into what is pot still Irish whiskey. What is it? It's three things, simply, and we'll taste another whiskey here in a second, but we're going to talk all about it. Essentially, it's barley water and yeast, but specifically it's unmalted and malted barley. So let's start talking about the barley. Have you ever tasted barley, malted or unmalted by itself? If so, you would probably notice that one is very flavorless and then one is very sweet. Malted barley is essentially where you take barley and you trick it into thinking it's springtime by soaking it in hot water. And it will actually start to convert its starches into sugars. And as soon as those have been converted to sugars, we stop it, we drain it, and we toast it, we kiln it. And that leaves us with all the sugary parts that we love about barley. Now, unmalted barley is a little bit different because unmalted barley is the seed that would go into the ground to spur a plant. And unmalted barley is full of different enzymes. You're looking at the starches and the proteins before they've been converted into amino acids and sugars. I know this sounds a little bit nerdy, but like I said, whiskey is algebra and chemistry, so we're going to get a little nerdy on this part. And so when you think about that, it's basically packed with energy. You take that little seed, and we all maybe work in the garden, I work in my yard, and that little seed is packed with just enough energy to find root in the ground, and then eventually the temperature and the soil and the rain will do its work. And so what we're doing in mashing and milling, you're taking unmalted barley, which is spice and texture. You're taking malted barley, which is a sweet cerealness. And you're going to put them together, and you're going to mill them, and you're going to mash them. The sugars in the malted barley are going to start to force convert. It's called mash conversion. It's going to start force converting the unmalted barley without sacrificing the flavors that it lends. Really nerdy when you look at it structurally, when you're looking at like chain reactions and stuff in chemistry, but for the sake of it, think of an unmalted barley as like a box and malted barley as like a key. And the malted barley is unlocking that box. And we're going to get all these flavors working together in mashing. And we're going to soak those together until we get as much sugar as we can, because we want to feed sugar to yeast. Because yeast eats sugar and gives off heat and also turns it into ethanol. And then in fermentation, we are going to start creating some fun flavors, which we will get to in a second. But we're also going to sip a single pot still Irish whiskey from Midleton called Barry Crockett. So let's also drink that. So for 70 years, Max and Barry, they were the master distillers. That's a long time for father and son to have say over an entire distillery. That's pretty freaking cool. Barry Crockett, he had his own bottle made for retirement. And it was kind of a joke at first. And it was like a one-off bottle for his retirement party. And they ended up running with it. And now they continue to make 2,500 bottles. They bottle 2,500 bottles of this a year. And so what was kind of a silly joke about retirement has turned into a mainstay and a cult favorite and a delicious high-end Irish whiskey. But sorry, I'm reading some of these things as I've seen some things pop up in the chat. But Barry Crockett, again, all ex-bourbon. But side by side, now that you're going to be able to taste this one, it's going to be fun to do these side by side. No corn spirit. Virtually the same. It still falls into the age range that Midleton Very Rare falls into. So virtually the same on paper, all the way up until the beginning where we changed the grain source. It's pretty neat to see that these were virtually treated the same, but one is 100% unmalted and malted barley and copper pot stills, and then one is about 80% and then 20% column still corn distillate. So side by side, pretty neat to see. Actually, I haven't poured mine yet, so bear with me for a second as I give myself a splash. But I get a little bit more citrus in this one than I do in the Midleton Very Rare. I think that's a little bit to do with the way barley ferments. There's aldehydes in barley that can give off more of a sharpness, like tells your brain, sour or that pop of a citrus. So to me, I just get a little bit more of that, like a lemon zest. That's why I put it here in the thing, but put it here on the page. Citrus oils, lemon zest. But you're still going to get a little bit of what you like about the Very Rare. You're still going to get the vanilla. You're still going to get the oak and some of those flavors that come from the American oak barrel. But,
So this would be akin to a single malt in Scotch terms versus, or is that not right?
not necessarily. Single malt is its own category too.
No, I understand, but this is only barley, right? And it's pot stilled.
Maybe more like a blended malt, but with pot still instead of single malts.
It's a single pot still. It's malted and unmalted barley.
Yeah,
So it's
single
all
pot
barley.
still.
But it's a single pot still style, which is malted and unmalted.
Yeah, and single pot still Irish whiskey. So really, in Irish whiskey, there are 4 subcategories. There is going to be blend. There's going to be single pot still. There's going to be grain, and there's going to be single malt too. There are single malt Irish whiskeys out there that are all made at the same distillery, and all the malt and all the barley is malted. But in order to be a single pot still Irish whiskey, it has its own category and its own definitions. And you basically take a sea salt, and you have to have at least 30% malted barley or at least 30% unmalted barley. So you can swing one way or the other. You can go 30-70 all the way to 70-30. Anything outside of that range, you no longer are within the definition of a single pot still. But you'll see that range flow very differently between some of the Teeling stuff, between some of our stuff, Dingle. There's a lot of cool distilleries out there that are playing in that 30-70, 70-30 range. For us, it is 60% unmalted, 40% malted. That's our signature style of single pot still Irish whiskey. But they are essentially 2 completely different categories.
Got it. Thanks very much.
Of course.
To that point, I believe this is the only non-sherried single pot still. I've been looking, and if there's one, it might be a smaller producer, but I've never been able to find one. The Dare Gaelics.
Yeah, the Dare Gaelics.
Oh, okay. In the same vein, I only have one of those, but good point.
And then there's some weird stuff in Method and Madness. Unfortunately, only like a few of those bottles are in the States because there's like 20 expressions of that stuff. There's some neat stuff over there in the micro distillery on site. But
are the Dare Gaelics still being made?
That's probably a question for Jameson. I know that we did all the trees that I thought we were going to do. I don't know if we're going to do any rebottlings of the trees that were already harvested from the families where we got the trees from certain sites around Ireland. That's a good question.
Thank you. The ones I've been able to get my hands on over here in the U.S. have been phenomenal. I just haven't seen any in ages.
It's one of my favorite expressions we make. It's so neat to see the virgin Irish oak. So there's a new version of Jameson coming to the States that will have that virgin Irish oak on it as well. We're bringing that single pot still Jameson back to life. And then we've made it a 5 cask Jameson. So you guys have probably seen it in your collection or maybe overseas. It was probably called Blender's Edition or a single pot still. There was another name for it. But it's coming over here with a new name and a new label. And it's going to be a single pot still Jameson with virgin Irish oak. But
yeah, to my knowledge, yes, on the Dare Gaelic. I haven't heard otherwise. But I can look into that and get an answer for you guys before we sign off here.
Cool. Yeah, I do think that those are done. Whether or not we rebottle, I'm not sure. But we've done the trees that we said that we were going to do. But anyways, we have a couple whiskeys in front of us. Hopefully you guys had sips back and forth to see how cool and how different the Very Rare and the Very Crockett are. So I think that's pretty neat to do those side by side. And let's get in a little bit further into the category here, and then we'll get into some more whiskey, because I can't wait to get to the end and hear about your questions and hear about your collections and stuff. So here are essentially 3 key rules for Irish whiskey that are important to remember that set us apart from the other categories of whiskey out there. And then one is, of course, distilled and matured in Ireland. And this is going to be really, when you put single pot still on the bottle, everything has to be in country. In Jameson, we have, in the Midleton Very Rare, our corn comes from France. But if you put single pot still on the bottle, like we put on Redbreast, we put on Very Crockett, that means from grain to glass was in country, which is pretty cool. And then another rule, which is pretty similar across all whiskey categories, is has to be bottled at no less than 40% ABV, which is pretty normal. We see that in all whiskey categories. Sans South Africa, they got a weird rule about being 86 proof instead of 80, so that's a little bit different. And then the rule that is really cool for us, because we're not beholden to virgin American oak like America, we're not beholden to oak species like Scotch. We have to be matured for a minimum of 3 years in wooden casks. Pretty vague, and I love the vagueness of that. Whoever had the foresight to give us the creative freedom to play around for years to come was brilliant for doing that, because we sure take our liberties, and that's exactly what we love to do at the distillery, especially when it comes to our Redbreast. So many fun finishes using different wine casks. So that leads us into this next slide. And this is just a fun slide. And really, this slide applies to all spirits. I use this slide for my bartenders a lot when I'm talking to people out there in restaurants and bars, because really everything undergoes this. And the more you kind of comprehend these 6 steps, the more refined you're going to build your palate, because you're going to, before long, start to know what something's going to taste like before you even get your hands on it, once you really get into all these things. But of course, you take your raw material, and we talked about that. We talked about unmalted and malted barley and why those are different. And then we're going to mill it, and that's basically grinding them together. It becomes like this floury, we call it grist. And then you mash it, and that is mash conversion. That is the malted barley, the sugar in the malted barley, converting the unmalted barley to more fermentable sugars. And then we add yeast, and this is where the magic can happen, because when we add yeast, we get, really, it's like, without getting too nerdy, this is like precursor of flavors. This is where we're going to get all the beginning flavors of the single pot still before we go into distillation. We're going to get, whenever you sip a whiskey and you say, oh, I get banana, I get apple, I get floral, those notes are actually coming before we even distill it. Those are flavors that we're creating when the acids in the yeast and the ethanol are all kind of playing together and creating flavors in fermentation. The word is called esterification, not to continue to throw big ass words at you guys, but it's basically the creation of flavors in fermentation. And from there, where of course they're going to distill it. You're going to separate all the chunky stuff from the liquid, and then you have yourself like a 10% beer, if you will, and then it's going to go into triple pot still distillation. And this is an important part for us, especially on the 3rd pass. The first pass is refining. You are trying to, I guess, Jameson, if you want to go down 2 more slides to the picture of the pot stills. So for the first pass, we have something called low wines. And this is called our wash still. And essentially you take that beer and you're going to pass it through. And this is where we are going to pull out all the undesirable flavors, or at least some of the undesirable flavors that are created in alcohol, because while we get all the fun flavors like the fruits and the acidity and the sweetness, we also get not fun flavors, because when yeast is under pressure, it creates sulfuric compounds. And the last thing we want our whiskey tasting like is eggs or meat or one of those funky sulfuric flavors associated with sulfurs. So we're trying to strip it away of certain flavors, and we're also trying to pull the water out, right? Because we're trying to refine the spirit. We're going to go from a 10% beer, and we're going to slowly build up and create more alcohol. And then we're going to take our spirit from there, and it's going to go into a faint still. And this is a little bit different because we split the receiving liquid into 3 cuts. You guys have probably heard of the heads and the hearts and the tails and whiskey. That's exactly what's happening here. We are splitting it into cuts and starting to form the elements of what we want our desirable end product to be. The heads, for those who don't know, contains a high portion of like certain esters and certain floral notes and certain spicy notes. And then we want to separate these and aside and run them through in the third pass. And then the middle is typically the balance that we want. It's got everything desirable that we want to run into still 3. And then the tails is important because the tails typically is left out, but there is something that was created in fermentation that we want to keep all the way along the way for single pot still. And it's something called a fusel oil. So while we're going to try to strip away some of the things we don't want, there are actually some things that might sound volatile, but we want them in the end product. For example, the reason Redbreast has this big body, this big viscosity, versus maybe the way something like the Midleton Very Rare or Green Spot tastes, or maybe even some of the Powers is, well, actually, I guess Powers does leave some fusel oils in too, but fusel oils, leaving those in is going to give it this big viscosity, this boldness, this oily character. And so we're trying to keep a little bit of that in Redbreast. We leave that out in Green Spot. Green Spot is way lighter, more floral, more fruity notes, more orchid fruit notes. So we have about an 82 to 85% new make spirit after 3 runs. Pretty hot stuff. And then, of course, we're going to bring that down with some water, and that's going to be demineralized water. And we're going to bring it down to 64%, just to ensure it doesn't burn the wood when you put it into the barrel, because it really would do that. And we don't want the acid in the wood and the ethanol interacting like that. We want it to be a little bit softer. So, and after years of maturation in casks, this will be known as triple distilled Irish whiskey, triple distilled Irish pot still whiskey. And that's essentially just a quick run through of pot still Irish whiskey. It is much more nerdy than that. We can nerd out on flavor profiles and what's happening in fermentation. But for the sake of it, that's what it is. And this next slide kind of breaks it down a little bit nerdier. This is just kind of a little bit of a recap on, I know a majority of what we taste in whiskey is the barrel. And it's kind of the name of the game. It's the barrel. 75% of the barrel is telling us what we're tasting, is kind of driving the bus, if you will. But when you get the distiller and the cooper in the same room talking, the distiller disagrees, because without the flavors that you created from the raw material, the flavors that are naturally in barley, unmalted and malted, and the flavors that you make in fermentation, and the flavors they become in distillation, without that being the flavor that goes into the barrel, and the barrel wouldn't give us the whiskey that it gives us. So it's kind of a chicken or an egg thing, and it's fun to listen to Kevin and Jared Buckley talk about whose side of the distillery matters more. It's kind of funny, but this is just a fun snapshot of kind of the nerdier side of what's happening along the way. It's fun to take note of. And that is going to get us into maturation. You guys have made it through history, and you've made it through the brand. We've talked about grain and the really complicated side of distillation. We're going to let spirit rest for a little bit in barrels while we take a rest and sip on another whiskey. So we are on to Redbreast 21. What a good lineup. I can't say that enough. Great choices, guys. Great choices to put these all together, because these are incredible. All right, I'm going to give myself a quick wash too. So while you guys are rinsing and repeating, give me one moment. I need to rinse and get a 21.
I personally was very impressed with this lineup of whiskeys. Very good.
Incredible. It's only missing Redbreast 27. What the heck, Jameson? No.
Oof. So for my wedding, we drank Redbreast 27 and a Redbreast 21, and it was just phenomenal.
Oh, wow.
It's just a
Those are
beautiful.
fun. Those are like the opposite side of the spectrum.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
like because the 21, a little more refined profile, and you get the elegance, but then the port and that fruitiness you get is just fantastic.
yeah, and that cast strength, man, it's so fun.
I did not get that invite.
You guys can probably imagine I'm always expected to bring something when I get invited to a party, or even if my brother-in-law just simply invites me over to watch football. He's always like, "What'd you bring?" I'm like, "I can't bring a bottle every time we watch a football game. Like, you're stealing my inventory, buddy." But
I have an unopened bottle of 27 in the closet that I got back when it was only $400 a bottle in the US.
Oh,
wow,
nice.
Send me your
wow,
I bought 3. I'm down to 1.
that's incredible. Yeah,
And now they're
Yeah.
going for $900 a bottle.
yeah, yeah.
And
you
I'm
know
not
what
going to
batch
sell
it
it. I'm
was?
going to drink it because it tastes so darn good.
Yeah.
It's so unique. It really is. There's nothing like it. And a couple of days ago, we just won some more awards. You guys, I don't know if you guys keep up with the different awards across the globe, but Redbreast just took home some more awards. Redbreast 12 won gold. Redbreast 27 won silver. Weirdly enough, but they've won best whiskey in the world 3 times, so they got awards. Redbreast Listal took home an award in this category, so pretty cool. I have a Redbreast 27 behind me. It's a batch 2. I don't have a batch 1. I have a 2.
Ooh, batch 2 was the mango-y.
Yeah,
A lot more
yeah,
mango came through on the batch 2. Love that
yeah.
batch.
I agree. Guava, mango, tropical.
Yeah, the guava too.
Yeah.
So
And then I have
that's a good point. Is there like I've had 3 different, I would say, batches of Crockett. Um, the batches of what's kind of you try the same, but maybe not. Are they really that different? The 27s? I guess there's 3 batches now. No,
Yeah,
six.
the
I only had the
27
one. That's what I have.
Five
Yeah.
batches now, right?
Yeah, the
It's
27
5? Wow.
is the biggest part about 27 is that it's aged in ex bourbon, ex oloroso, and ex port. And what's changing predominantly in that is the portions of those 3 in the bottle. And they are purposely different every time. We're not even trying to match the previous year's one. We want different expressions on 27. That's why we bothered putting the word batch on the front of the bottle.
Oh,
But
okay.
they definitely are different, and they're pretty neat. When you get more port in there, you can tell like batch 2, that porty juicy jam, like tropical vibes kind of pops off in there.
The fruit flavor just blows your brain right out.
Yeah, it's so good.
It's just it's the fruitiest of the Redbreast line I've ever had, and it just absolutely blows my mind every time I sip it.
Yeah. I've had the experience, a few friends of ours got together and we did 1 through 4 side by side, and it's so unique. It's pretty fantastic. But I think, yeah, 2, the jamminess just explodes. I think that one's my favorite of the first 4.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess let's get into talking about 27. I wish we had it now, but no slight to 21 at all, of course, too. Completely different whiskeys and also gorgeous in its own right. Incredibly aromatic. And I think this is fun because sometimes when you see age statements, at least for me, especially when you're looking at maybe like American whiskeys, I stay away from something too old because when some of these bourbons, get up into those 18s and higher, it just has the wood is just driving is in the driver's seat. It's telling it what to do, and it can be super over oaked or super tannin driven. But this is kind of a testament as to why you can go a long time in Irish whiskey, and because we are using previously filled casks that would have been spent a little bit. And then, of course, when you use a second fill cask, it's almost like akin to making yourself a cup of tea and then taking out that tea bag after you've made a cup of tea and putting it in a new cup of hot water. It's not a ton of tea flavor anymore, but the water is still there. And that's kind of the analogy I like to draw for that. So it's, even though it says 21 years old, it's not 21 years old necessarily of the wood telling it where to go. There's also the flavors that we built in fermentation and the flavors that we built in distillation. Those flavors are growing and refining as well as they sit there for 21 years or more. And, sometimes we want the wood to tell it what to do. Sometimes we want the wood to be for the esters and the spirit to kind of play on their own. But 21 is absolutely gorgeous to me. You're looking at least 21 years in ex-bourbon first fill, at least 21 years in ex-Oloroso sherry first fill, and then they are blended together after those years together. And so a lot of time in wood, a lot of patience, and this stuff is absolutely gorgeous to me. Super aromatic. Limited quantities here again. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure how many we put on the shelves each year, but it's not as much as like the 12 and stuff per se. But man, it's gorgeous, and hopefully you guys at the end we'll kind of see what everybody's favorite was. But this is gorgeous to me. I keep saying we're gorgeous, but that's kind of what keeps coming to mind for 21. So refined.
Couple hundred cases of this one on the shelf on a yearly basis. But Joe, I'm curious for my own personal knowledge why the 21 before the 18 in your lineup here today.
Yeah. The 18 has port and it has cream sherry. The 18 to me is the richest of the lineup without doing 27. And I will save this for last very often because it is so big and bold and chocolatey and spicy that I wouldn't want you to lose the nuance of another whiskey that would have came after it. There was a kind of a necessary evil to the order we had today. It was so that we wouldn't rock our palate by the end. And if I had moved, I think originally it looked like it was going to be Muscatel 18, 21, and then into the Midletons. That would have been a wild order to do it in. I think we would have lost the nuance of the Very Crockett and of the Very Rare. But I think we'll see why. When we get to 18, you guys, I think you're going to see why this thing is just so fun and bold. 18 is insane. It's got 93 points. It came out of the gates gold 2 years ago. But
Hey, Joe, a question came up about maybe comparison to 12, 15, and 21.
Yeah.
In terms of the casks used maturation. So I know that the obviously age differently time-wise, but can you go into a little bit about different casks used, first fill, second fill, or maybe just the proportion of things to the extent that you can?
Yeah, no, absolutely. 15 is a sleeper to me. It's one of my favorites. I like to bring that to trade shows and stuff because it's kind of for some reason it gets overlooked. People know 12 and people love all the fun finishes that we do, and then for some reason people tend to just jump up to the high numbers. But 12 is ex-bourbon, ex-sherry, predominantly ex-bourbon as the backbone of that DNA. At least 12 years in both. No other casks. First fill ex-bourbon, first fill ex-sherry, bottled at 80 proof, chill filtered. So 15 we're jumping up to 92. And 15 is cool because it's the only one that we do first fill and second fill bourbon, first fill and second fill sherry. So, example, had it been in this lineup of the spirit aging on its own. So you got the oak telling it what to do. You got the Spanish oak telling it to taste like these dried fruits and these spice notes. You got the American oak telling it to taste like vanilla and hazelnuts and chocolates and creme brulees. But then these second fill casks don't have a lot to them. So the flavors that we made in fermentation, the fruit notes and some of those velvety textures and flavor profiles that we made in fermentation and distillation, they get to be refined without being forced what to do. And then those portions come together. 15 is over 50% ex-bourbon first and second fill. And I would say, what am I about to tell you guys? I would say about a quarter. Which doesn't sound like a lot when you say 75% is going to be ex-American oak, but a quarter of Spanish oak, of European oak, is kind of a lot. We'll get into that in a second on maturation, on why the structure of that wood is so different and why it makes things taste so different. But a quarter of sherry is a big portion, and that's kind of what we do at Redbreast. So we have a more sherry portion than most brands out there. So, and then we get to 21, and 21 is almost like the 12 for 9 more years at least of just being refined and sitting there and evolving in those barrels. So,
can either of you gentlemen tell me why Irish whiskey seems to have that spice, which I really like, especially the single pot stills?
Yeah. kind of goes all the way back to the beginning. There's a spice element to barley. Sometimes when I'm doing an in-person workshop, I'll bring barley with me, and I will ask you to take a piece of malted barley and chew on it. It just kind of tastes like a sweet sunflower seed. And then I will ask you to crack unmalted barley with your teeth, put it on your tongue, and stick it to the roof of your mouth. And it's neat because your saliva starts reacting to the enzymes in the unmalted barley, and you start salivating and getting this interesting like spice note, while also getting this velvety texture as your saliva interacts with the unmalted barley in your mouth. And that's very similar to kind of what is happening in mash conversion. We're taking the sweetness and the biscuity notes of the sugary piece of barley, but we're also going to hold on to that raw spiciness and texture of the unmalted barley. And it's really what it's becoming in fermentation when you introduce the yeast. These flavors are just kind of coming to life, and they're creating bonds. If you guys remember chemistry, short chain and long chain, like bonds and amino acids, they're creating bonds in fermentation, and they're strengthening those flavors. And then when you go into distillation, you're now refining the flavor that you strengthen. So we're just kind of keep diving in to those sweet profiles and to those spicy profiles all the way along the way. And then, of course, you introduce it to wood, and there are spicy components to wood sugars that naturally exist in wood. So it was spicy not spicy, as you guys know, I don't mean spicy as in hot sauce, but it had spice from the beginning, and then we continued to build that spice. And then when you put it into specifically Spanish oak is a tighter grain species of wood called Quercus robur. It's a tighter grain species of wood that is going to impart tannin, like spice and dryness and those types of notes to the spirit. But
excellent.
A long-winded answer, but
yeah, thank you.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into this next picture. This is one of our rooms. Typically, I would ask the class or ask the room, how many barrels do you think we have at Midleton? And no one ever gets close to it because everyone says like 100,000, 50,000 or something like that. No one ever.
2 million.
There we go. I love to hear it. Someone's been. Absolutely.
2,200.
Yeah. 2.2 million barrels.
Wow.
And we have, this is one house. There's about 160 of these, 16,800 barrels per warehouse. That's about, so the entire inventory is about 750 million bottles of booze, which is nuts to think about. But here's a fun analogy that I went down a little, I took my calculator out and went down a little rabbit hole with this. One room is 16,800 barrels. If you turn your faucet on in your kitchen, your faucet is going to fill up 10 liters a minute. To match the volume of whiskey in just this room in this picture, you'd have to leave your sink on full blast for 9 months, which is crazy. It's a silly analogy, but it's fun to kind of think of it in terms that we understand around the house. But what a heck of a water bill. Pretty insane to think about. But these are one of those rooms. If you've ever been able to go on one of these tours, one of the famous parts of these tours is you'll get brought to the back and they'll get the whiskey thief out and they'll pour you something straight from a cask. And it's pretty neat. They always pick something different. But last time I was there, not to rub it in, you guys, but Kevin pulled a port barrel that was over 40 years old, and we got to drink it straight, and it was pretty wild stuff. It was so good. I don't know what he's going to do with that, but he let me try it, so that was neat.
That sounds amazing. That must have been a fruit bomb.
Not to rub it in.
Yeah.
It also sounds like one I'll never be able to taste.
Yeah, like those silent chapter kind of bottles that go for 30 to 60K a pop. Pretty wild price there. Yeah, some collectors out there that love that stuff. Oh man, I'll be there in a few weeks, so I'm excited to see what we're working on, or maybe get to taste something. Last time I was there too, I got to try something. So they have that micro distillery on site called Method of Madness, as you guys know, because I saw some of you mentioning some of the bottles in your collection. Really cool stuff. It's like a project to try things on a small scale before we, try it on a larger scale. they've been playing around with Brazilian finishes with some Amburana wood, which is what you famously age like a Brazilian rum is called cachaça in, and it is pretty interesting. There's a Method of Madness Amburana wood that I got to try cask strength. And I think Method of Madness is going to launch the Amburana, and it's just fun thing that we're doing. You know, we have 2.2 million barrels. We have the freedom to experiment, and we have the inventory to experiment. And it's just kind of cool to see what they're cooking up in that micro distillery on site.
For whoever was saying they like the spice, Amburana has a really unique spice element to it with this little funk too. It's really interesting.
It is funky. Yeah, if you've ever had a cachaça by itself, it's like an agricole style of rum, which is like the sugarcane juice instead of the molasses. It's funky. So that's one warehouse. Let's get on to this next slide. This is just a fun map, and this is where I want to get nerdy a little bit about where we get our barrels from. And we all kind of understand. I typically don't spend too much time on American barrels because we all understand what that is. You know, it's a Char 3 or a Char 4 getting used by Jack Daniels or Woodford or Wild Turkey or somebody. And it gets used once, and then it comes over to us, and we use it again. And pretty simple. It's all the same American oak species, typically a 3 or a 4 Char from one of the more famous bourbon families, and then we use it again. We don't have a specific relationship with anybody. Everyone always asks, who do you predominantly use or who do you have a contract with? There's no one really specific. We just have an amazing team of people who are sourcing, and we have different contracts with different people, and we just keep the barrel influx coming. But sherry is interesting because sherry has a very rich history, and sherry can go back to 1100. Before we even created whiskey in 1405, sherry was taking wine, and they were introducing spirit to it. So I know we said we didn't recreationally drink grain spirit until 1405. It was mostly science and medicine. Some on record, people were fortifying wine with brandy distillate, and this is where sherry kind of came to life. Sherry wouldn't actually get its like rules and regulations until way later in the 1600s, but we know that back in the 1100s they were kind of messing around. But what's interesting about sherry is most of our sherry is going to come from the sherry triangle. There are two major categories of sherry wine. One is called Vino Generoso, which means general wine. And in that triangle down there, as you can see on my map here, you'll see that we have the dot all the way down there is going to be the sherry triangle. And within that sherry triangle, you're going to get things like Palo Cortado and Fino and Amontillado, which are all lovely. But what we get a lot of is Oloroso. And Oloroso is what we famously use in most of our stuff. When we say ex-sherry on Redbreast, unless we specify another type of wine, it's Oloroso sherry from the sherry triangle. When we use sherry in Jameson, it's Oloroso from the sherry triangle. But sometimes we have stuff like the Tawny Port, or we have the PX, or we have the Lestau, or we have the Muscatel. And that's a little bit different. So when it comes to our, we have great relationships with these bodegas. And some of these bodegas, we've had a relationship for multiple generations throughout Spain. So companies like the Gibley brothers, for instance, and Nichol and Sons, once upon a time, they would have had relationships with families like this all the way through Europe and into South Africa too. And they would be sourcing their wine barrels from these places. Now, I'm not suggesting that we have been using them that long. There's nothing on paper that says that the Gibley brothers were using the same families that we are now. That'd be pretty cool if we were. But we do use specific families. And I just wanted to kind of give a shout out to the ones that are represented today. When it comes to the Redbreast Moscatel, you can see on here, it's a little bit further south in Malaga, and it's called the Bodegas Quitapeñas, and pretty cool translation. Bodegas Quitapeñas translates to takes sorrow away, which I think is kind of nice. Like, what else does whiskey do, right? So Quitapeñas. And it's been owned by the Suarez family since 1880. And for us at the Midleton Distillery, they do a 2-year seasoning of Muscatel, and then they send them to us, and we do like a 16 to 18 month finish on that. And then for a majority of our Oloroso barrels, We have that long-time relationship with the mentioned bodega on here called Antonio Paez Labato in Jerez. And Antonio Paez is kind of a unicorn of a cooperage because in 1945, they started their own winery, and most people are one or the other. You're either a bodega or you're a cooper. And they have a unique relationship or a unique business because they do both. So they grow their own grapes and they manage their own fermentation. They manage their own aging. They specialize in Oloroso and PX, which is also a delicious statement for us if you guys have had it. And then cream sherry, which we're about to taste in 18. So not only do we primarily use Oloroso, but we use them for cream sherry in Redbreast 18, and then we use them for their PX in the Iberian series release. And then for the Tawny Port, because we're going to have a port finish in the 18, and we famously also have that Tawny Port bottle that's really hard to come by. It's actually one I'm missing out of my inventory because it hasn't been stocked in Chicago in a while. But when it comes to port, you go to Portugal, and there's a cooperage there called Taco Pau, and they are like a super high-end wood management firm. They don't have their own wine, but they function as like a broker, quality controller for the Midleton barrels that we're sourcing. So they are a historic port house in the Douro Valley, and we work with Villanova de Gaia, and they season the barrels with tawny port, and then we get them. So two kinds of things are happening in this area. You're either a cooper or you're a bodega, and sometimes you're both. And then for Lestal, for those of you that might have that Lestal bottle at home, which we all love, Lestal is its own brand. You can find Lestal wine and Lestal vermouth and Lestal brandy at the store. There's a very famous family. It goes back a couple hundred years. They're a juggernaut in the wine business. They actually would have been around in the Gibley brothers' time. So it'd be neat to see if we could ever come across some paperwork that shows that the Gibley brothers had some Lestal wine. That would be kind of neat. So Lestal is the only bodega that operates at all 3 points of the Sherry Triangle. So they're kind of like the Midleton of the Sherry Triangle. They're like the biggest deal down there. So having that relationship for that one bottle we did is pretty neat because they're, as I said, they're a big deal. And this next picture is a picture of that bodega. It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. You feel like you're trapped back in time, the arches and the open air ceilings, and it's just pretty neat. A lot of the bodegas are going to look like this, but this one is massive. They have so many warehouses and a gift shop and all the things that you would have when you have an operation of this scale. But we're going to get back into the barrel, and it's just a little bit of a recap of what I kind of talked about. This will live here for us for those that want to watch it back or take screenshots of this. But the main things that I speak on when I am talking about wood, as we have already, are going to be additive reactions and subtractive reactions. Now, additive reactions as a fancier term for describing what the wood adds to the liquid. You know, the main one here is simply flavor. This is because the wood itself has different chemical compounds, sugars, and acids in it. Wood has sugars. I don't know if you ever chewed on a piece of wood, or maybe, hopefully not. Maybe when you were a kid, you might have chewed on a piece of wood, but don't do that now. We're adults. But if you would have chewed on a piece of wood, it actually is kind of sweet. It's called hemicellulose. There's sugars that exist in the wood, and there's acids that exist in the wood too. So these compounds are diffusing bold flavors into the spirit. And as we know, the temperature fluctuates, and the spirit breathes in and out of the wood, extracting those flavors. So it breathes in when it's hot, it breathes out when it's cold, and it just kind of keeps absorbing those sugars and those acids from the wood. Another thing that I talk about when we say an additive reaction is going to be color, right? Because before we add our new make whiskey to barrels, it's completely clear. You guys have seen moonshine, you've seen poachine, it's clear. But when it starts to interact and flow in and out of the porous wood, it's going to collect colors and flavors from the oak. And especially from the sherry barrel, because it previously held wine. Some of that wine kind of made its way into the barrel. So as the whiskey is going into the barrel to retrieve some of those flavors, it's going to retrieve some of those colors. So fairly simple, but that's kind of what's happening. And then subtractive reactions, for example, sulfur. We try to get most of the sulfur out in distillation, but sometimes little tiny bits of these compounds make their way into the barrel. but we trust the wood to do its job, because what carbon can do in a charred barrel is filter the rest out. So while sometimes there's a little bit of harsh components left, because that is a pretty hot spirit, pretty volatile spirit coming out that's going into the barrel, the wood is going to smooth that over time. And then the char on the inside is going to help remove the sulfur, because the carbon can act as a filter. And then, of course, the key thing that happens in subtractive is angel share. So another question asked for the class typically is, now that we know there's 2.2 million barrels, how many bottles of whiskey do you think we lose a day if 2% angel share is the number? It's a simple math question if you had a calculator out. So I'll answer it for you. 32,000 bottles a day. We have so many barrels that's how many bottles we technically lose a day to the angel share, which is a heck of a party, if you ask me. But man, I thought I was going to get some comments on that one. Usually people are like, holy crap, but
It's heartbreaking, man. Heartbreaking.
I know.
Could you repeat that number, please?
So 2.2 million barrels.
Barrels.
At a rate of 2% angel share. Wow. Yeah, 32,000 a day. It's heartbreaking. You're right, man. So all casks have undergone some form of like toasting or charring, and for the American oak, this is like an intense charring by like a gas burner. You guys have probably seen these when you're going to Kentucky, gone on a little road trip or something. Placed directly in the barrel. And for the European oak, we use like a toasting over a natural fire, because we're not going to put wine into a charred barrel. You want to toast the wood into place and kind of capture, kind of nerdy again, but like the cellulose, the hemicellulose, the wood polymers that are in the oak, we need to trap those. So it's almost like we're curing it. So we need to toast it. And so in wine, we're going to toast, and in an American bourbon, we're going to char. And we're essentially breaking down the elements in the surface of the wood, so that when the spirit and the wood start interacting, we're getting all the flavors that we want. We're getting the tannins that we want. We're getting the fun roasted and charred flavors that we want. And then that leads me into these guys. Perfect Harmony. You guys probably know him. You guys have been drinking whiskey long enough. This is Billy Layton. He is an absolute legend. He was someone who was responsible for bringing a lot of the Redbreast SKUs to life. Like Barry Crockett was probably the one who put Redbreast back on the map. Redbreast technically never went away. It is the longest continuously made pot still Irish whiskey in the world. Technically never went away. Like Spot went away for a little bit and then came back out. Billy Layton had his hands in that process. He was trying to bring some of those old SKUs back to life, making sure the Spots tasted the way they used to taste, and trying to find new ways to make new Redbreast expressions. He since has passed it on to Dave McCabe, who is our master blender now, and he has taken the reins. And the last whiskey is his whiskey. Dave McCabe, his first bottle that he was able to kind of give to the whiskey world was Redbreast 18. That is the first time he got to have his own whiskey, and we're going to get to that one now. This is going to be Redbreast 18. And again, hopefully when you nose it and you sip it, you taste it, you're going to realize why we had to do this one last. It is so rich. So much going on. To me, it has this staying power that it won't go away. That you can take a nice sip and work it around your gums, let some sit on your tongue for a second, really kind of take in those flavors. And then once you swallow it, it just won't go away. Like 5 minutes later, you're like, did I eat a piece of chocolate or something? Like, what is that? It's so delicious. So here we're going like prunes and berries and chocolates and spice. I'll let you guys enjoy it for a second, so I don't talk.
Definitely get chocolate out of that.
Right off the front on the nose. Cacao, like right on the nose. It tastes like a chocolate covered, like you go to a chocolate shop and you buy like all the fun little chocolate covered berries. That's what it smells like. Like a chocolate covered black cherry or something.
Do you think there'll be more of that cask strength version coming out, or even coming to the US potentially one day?
I hope so. I know that Europe tends to get cool releases, and Ireland gets cool releases, like the Redbreast 15 cast strength, for instance. But we'll see. If we can get through our inventory at the right rate, I imagine, because it's a different game over here. It's a very commercially driven game. So if we're selling enough and we're moving the product, maybe that's when they send us more. But that unfortunately is Jameson's job. He's got the big spreadsheets and data job. I just have to tell the stories. But every time I'm over there, there's something new in the gift shop. There's some new age statement on blue spot or red spot or some other finish. And I'm like, I'm not even allowed to, like, how many more whiskeys could I bring home? I can only do a couple bottles per luggage.
Better with water.
Well, 18, I'm a big fan of adding water to everything. There's something about you're kind of breaking apart those chemical bonds by adding H2O to the chemical bond inside the glass, and so it's kind of softening the glass. Similar to, I can't stand when people put bottles in the freezer, for instance, because you're muting flavors that exist. And so kind of what's happening in this glass is there are flavors underneath the flavors that need to come out, and it's going to come out with dilution. Do you know that at all the whiskey awards, the guys, these famous men and women who are tasting and smelling these whiskeys and then deeming them gold or giving them a points system, they do 50-50. They are trying to find esters and flavors that exist when it's 50-50 with water. So it's pretty serious. Like, 'cause I think a lot of whiskey is so thin that if you added that much water, you're going to lose it, and that probably would be a bad score. But if you made such a depth and rich and beautiful whiskey that I can add 50-50 water with this and still pick up on beautiful notes and find all those hidden undertones, those are the ones that will go on and win gold or get high scores. I didn't find that out until a few years ago. I didn't realize that they 50-50'd it. I think that's pretty neat. They're trying to make sure your whiskey can stand up to that much dilution, and they're looking for some serious depth. Redbreast 18 for sure would stand up to more water. I do agree with you on a splash of water in 18. It's really fun.
Ooh, I second getting the cast strength powers John's Lane in the US would be fantastic.
Depending on what state you're in, I would say you can get it ordered. Shipping prices have come down a bit, but
yeah,
but it's worth it even if to pay a little bit more.
Yeah, no, yeah, you totally can order quite a few things now and just pay whatever they're asking. But no, that's one of my favorites, and hopefully you guys see why. It's the only one that tastes like that in the whole lineup, and I didn't want that richness and that chocolatey kind of juicy notes to drown out any of the nuances in the previous spirits. So hopefully you guys like the order we went in. I think it's a pretty fun order, and these are some gorgeous whiskeys to taste in general on a Sunday afternoon. But
Probably the best Middleton lineup I've had. That wasn't just friends getting together.
yeah. Yeah, some of the crazy stuff can come out, huh? When you get together, everyone brings a weird bottle.
Yeah.
You have no business drinking. You're 9 whiskeys deep, opening up a $500 bottle. I've been there. Yeah. I woke up the next morning, and then you go to the kitchen and make some coffee, and you're like, oh no, why is that bottle halfway gone? What did I do? But whoops.
We have the same kind of friends.
Yeah.
That is the struggle. Good whiskey goes down too easily.
Yeah, I have to admit the 18 on its own, when I tasted it maybe a month ago when I first got it, it was good, but compared to the rest of the range and in this environment, and then just adding a touch of water, the chocolate, I barely got it the first time. And so
to the point of doing what we're doing here. And someone just said they don't get to do it often with this amazing array of whiskeys. Very good. Thank you.
No, of course. I encourage you, if you guys have anything left, like now that you've had this rich 18, go back to maybe something like Midleton Very Rare, and you're going to really appreciate its lightness and its like floralness. It's compared to 18, it already was light, but then when you go back from something this rich, you're really going to have like a new appreciation for something that has like a completely different texture, aroma, and finish. Like Very Rare is very special to me. It's one of my favorites too.
Joe, could you call my wife and tell her that you just told me to drink more whiskey?
Of course, yeah. Just put her number in the chat. Yeah, mandatory tasting.
Yeah, I don't know if people are circling back in the lineup, but I just tried again the Muscatel, and to me it's a completely different animal than the 18. So it's interesting when you retry some of these. I'll be curious to hear what people's favorite of the day is once they've had a chance to kind of maybe go back through some of them.
Yeah,
my wife keeps stealing sips.
Well, some of you guys are in for an interesting Monday. When your whiskey gets here, you have to call your boss and call out of work and enjoy yourself.
Retired.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Two more years.
That's why we schedule these early enough, Joe. So no late nights.
Oh yeah, you can have dinner, drink some water, go to sleep like a baby.
Allan, Joe, Jameson, I just want to say thank you very much for pulling this together. This has been extremely enjoyable. It's been very, very educational, and it's been a lot of fun. I can't thank you guys enough for pulling this together.
Thank you so much. Yeah, these are always interesting to do. I'm more of a travel the country. I'm the national brand ambassador for all the brands we have, and typically I get to be in classrooms and we're walking back and forth, and there's some elements and there's this camaraderie and this it's a different vibe when you're in the room sharing the space with people. So doing these virtually are always kind of tough, trying to get through the PowerPoint, wondering if people are enjoying it or if they're following along. But I appreciate you saying that these virtual classes can be a tough animal compared to hanging out together in person. But
hey, Joe, I have a question for you, sir. First of all, this was magnificent, and I enjoyed it just more than I can say.
Thank you.
And the Redbreast 18 just blew me away. My question is this. I'm headed to Midleton in July, and I was scheduling the Premier Whiskey. They wouldn't let me do 2 in one day. Something about responsible drinking. I don't know what the hell they were talking about.
Oh, what does that mean? Yeah,
I know, right? But anyway, I was going to do the Premier Whiskey taste and then the Redbreast taste the next night. So I have 2 questions for you. The first question is, have I precluded that here? Does it have value? And I'll put the other question on that you can do it once both at the same time, is why don't they have a spot tasting? Okay, I'll let you take it.
Oh man, those are good questions. I might not know the answers to those, but it is definitely, I would definitely do both. And I'll even throw, I'm sure some of the guys in the group have been to Midleton, but while you're there, remind me in our group WhatsApp. I'll tell you a couple of nice restaurants and some fun pubs that you got to go to while you're there. Because Midleton, while it's only 2.2 square miles, there's some fun stuff that's like right there on the strip that's kind of cool. And if you want to get outside of that, I'll tell you where to go eat and drink and cork. But back to the question. Both those classes, very worth it. You're going to see a different side in those classes. They're going to be a little bit similar as far as the tour you're given, but you're going to be able to hear kind of the full spectrum. You're going to hear the full story being able to doing both dives because they're different stories, and you're going to see probably different warehouses. So I would do both. I think it's worth it. As far as why they don't do a spot one, I'm not sure. I guess I didn't realize that we didn't. I thought we offered a spot flight. Maybe we offer a flight at the bar there in the distillery, but we don't have a separate class for it. I know we have a high-end flight too that goes through all like the high-end Midleton stuff, like up into like the crazier stuff, but I'm not sure.
I think you can get a spot tasting if you go to Mitchell and Sons.
In
Dublin.
Awesome. Yeah.
They can bring you downstairs and do the full range there.
Oh, sweet. Thanks, man.
Yeah, that'll be cool.
Hi, Joe. I have a quick question for you.
Of course.
On the heads, the tails, and the hearts,
Yes.
they make how and who makes that distinction as to where exactly they make the cuts?
That is a great question. That is one of the key jobs of the master distiller, because we make 7 brand families. Brand family has dozens of bottlings, and that's just in the States. Like when you look at Europe, some of these bars and these cool restaurants are getting one-off casks and getting other stuff too. There's a ton of product coming out. So how do we make the cut to signify this is a certain spirit, or why we make the cut? And a little bit of that can go to tradition and heritage. We make a certain cut on Powers, because Powers traditionally was this robust, oily fusel oil spirit. And so we keep that true. The Powers John and Redbreast 12 drink very similarly, but Redbreast 12 will have way more sherry maturation on the end, but they're treated as a similar cut. And now 2026, we do have some technology at our hands, so we can make sure that, everything is cooperating on the computers and cutting things accordingly. But essentially, you're deciding, the big thing you're deciding is the fusel oils that you made in fermentation. Are we going to leave some of those in? Do we want this big, robust honey, like mouthfeel, almost syrupy, or are we trying to be a little bit lighter on the palate? So you might have heads, hearts, and tails, but you also have light, medium, and heavy pot still. So while you're deciding where the cut is, you're also deciding light, medium, or heavy on that cut at the same time. They kind of go hand in hand. Light, medium, heavy goes hand in hand with heads, hearts, tails. But
So it's like kind of chemistry and alchemy.
yeah, it really does. Yeah. A famous alchemist created distillation in the 9th century in Iran, and it's been that way ever since. It went from being magic and being some kind of sorcery to being algebra and chemistry. But
Yeah, amazing. So like there's a bar in Galway called Sonny Malloy's.
yeah,
And Redbreast makes a 19-year-old just exclusively for them, and it's aged. I believe it's aged exclusively in Oloroso.
it is.
So when the pour, the glass is almost black, and like and it's cash strength too. And this thing is just, I mean, it is exquisite, and it is the finish on it. It's like the sherry. It's this waterfall of. It's just an amazing.
I was just at Sonny Malloy's last November.
Yeah, that's one of the
That was in
darkest.
October.
That's one of the darkest whiskeys I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never seen anything that dark, but it is a magnificent tipple.
Yeah, it's a long time in the barrel, and then we don't dilute it, so it's not brightening up that color. As that dilution will kind of reduce the ABV, but also it's brightening up the color. So it's so good. You're right. I love that one. Sonny Malloy's famously has every single silent chapter bottle too, as you probably saw in that glass case. They have every single one. Kevin O'Gorman, the master distiller, is really close with that family, and they often get some pretty cool stuff in there. They get some one-off bottles, and they get everything of ours. Every time I go to Galway, or I take people to Galway, we go to Sonny's. Such a good spot.
Yeah, Sonny's and Garavans has got another magnificent selection too.
Yeah, I agree. And I imagine, have you guys ever gone to the Celtic whiskey shop in Dublin on Stephen's Green right there on the corner?
Yes.
Yeah, they also get
Many
a
times.
one-off of Redbreast as well, and they also get like one-offs of Dingle and one-offs of like oh my gosh, what is it other? I'm drawing a blank. West Cork is another one. Oh, I'm being a little less biased now, but there's some other good families out there that I like.
Have you ever been to Banker's Bar
I don't know. I might have.
in Dublin?
It's a great one.
Yeah.
It's a really
It's
good
just
one.
off
Banker's Bar.
demonstration.
If I could interject here for 1 second, I just want to thank you guys, Joe, Jameson specifically, just to kind of maybe formally put a end to the formal presentation. Then we can just open it up to overtime, because it's been 2 hours now. I don't want people to feel obligated to stay, but for those of you who've been on these events with us, we we can go long and stay around and talk about what whiskeys we're drinking in pubs and stuff like that. So before we get too much further into that, which is kind of the good stuff, for those of you that have done it before, I do want to just again formally acknowledge and thank you guys for this tasting. I know from reading the chat, everyone enjoyed it and learned something and got to taste some whiskeys in a lot of cases that they haven't had before. So again, very thank you, heartfelt thanks for this.
So much, guys. Appreciate it. We've been, and I won't speak for Jameson, but I'm sure he does too. We've been trying to do more of this. We've been trying to get with more clubs and more people like you guys who truly are, connoisseurs and big fans of the whiskey world, instead of, a lot of our time is spent in bars and restaurants and hotels and who's selling our whiskey. But it's nice to kind of also get into the spaces where people are just big fans and true fans of our whiskey in these clubs, especially the Irish Whiskey Society of America. So, thank you for even thinking of us. Thank you for getting us involved. Even though it was a tough workaround to get everything together, we got there. To those of you that didn't get your whiskey, I had deep apologies, but enjoy that tomorrow. And I enjoyed my time with you guys. And of course, I'm always around. I'm in the chat with you guys too. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Haven't
Thank you.
received their packages yet. You're going to a nice little surprise in there as well.
Yeah.
That was a very nice surprise. That's a neat little thing I wasn't expecting to see.
Cool.
Yeah, so you got to write everything down so you won't forget it.
Yeah.
or just
Thank you for
keep
including
rewatching the videos, right? But
yeah.
So this isn't goodbye. I just wanted to get that in there because I know people will drop off as we go. But now we can say we're officially in overtime bonus mode. So let the questions fly or the experiences that you'd like to share with, and Joe and Jameson. We'd love for you guys to stick around as long as you'd like. But I know people have obligations too on Sundays. So
no, for sure. I can stick around for a little bit. I can't speak for Jameson, but I'm happy to stick around for a little bit and chat it up.
Yeah,
Joe,
absolutely.
can I jump in?
I can stick on for a few minutes, but yeah, just wanted to say thank you as well on our end and echo Joe for those who didn't get your samples. Please do enjoy. Sorry for the delay there. I think, I've worked across a couple different brands in the alcohol space, and I know Joe mentioned commercially driven things can be, but I think it's, the heart and the energy and the passion that you guys have for these brands and these SKUs is what makes them special brands and what makes, what makes it more than just like a grocery store brand. That this is the good stuff, and we really do appreciate the passion that you guys have for the brands and all the different expressions. So I know Joe is the liquid expert, but if you guys have questions about anything on shelf or portfolio wise, innovation wise, I'm happy to chime in and answer as well. So thanks again, really do appreciate the time, and great for me to keep learning as well, Joe. I think I could sit down and learn a million things from you, obviously. So thank you for leading and for all your background knowledge on not just the liquid, but also the algebra and chemistry that you mentioned. It's super cool to hear you dive in. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Joe, can I jump in with a question?
Please do. Yeah.
But before I ask my question, I just want to tell you, Joe, that when you mentioned you're in Chicago, I'm also in Chicago, and I texted my son and I said, "Hey, do you know Joe Nicol?" And he immediately responded, which is nice when your 27-year-old son responds. And he said, "Yeah, he represents Midleton in the Midwest or in the United States. I think I met him at Slightly Toasted." So you're famous among the 20-somethings who actually know whiskey.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
So thank you very much for that.
They see a different side of me. I represent, everything from $25 Jameson and parties to, this distinguished spirits. And the Jameson side of me gets on stage with my shirt off singing rock songs. So the bartenders know that version of me. Yeah.
He's into the good stuff. So, but now I'm going to betray how little I know about it, because you mentioned bodegas several times, and every time you mention it, I'm picturing a tiny little grocery store in New York. And then you put the picture up there, and it's this enormous warehouse. So can you just tell me, as sort of the clueless dad who's being introduced to whiskey with Allan's help and with my son's help, what is a bodega in Spain and Portugal versus what I think of in New York, which is a tiny little store?
Yeah, for sure. There are a bodega is
question. Sorry?
Typically it's typically a winery. It's typically a family that has their own winery. So it's almost like if you were in Napa, right? We just call those wineries, except for this family makes Spanish wine, and you typically source your own barrels. But like I said earlier, there's one family that we use that, interestingly enough, is a cooperage and also a bodega, which is like a unicorn in that world. Usually you don't do both. So essentially it's a small family, it's a family winemaker, typically multiple generations, and they do everything from till the soil to planting the grape to watching the fermentation time to aging it. They are all the way from soil to barrel, like a small family production. Like if you were, like, I kind of akin to like just driving around and walking into like a small, like you're in Chicago, so if we went over to Michigan and we went into like a cool small winery, kind of looks like that. There are these really cute, like small scale wineries that are just specializing in a different kind of grape, and they're not making, Sauvignon Blanc. They're making sherry.
All right, thanks. That's good to know. You're a Spanish teacher too.
Before all this, I was a teacher for a few years, and I was a music teacher for K through 8th grade, and then they cut some of the funding, and my sister was a bartender at a nice restaurant, and that was my in. I was like, all right, here we go, time to bartend.
It's good to see you're still in the arts. Different
Yeah.
kind of arts, but they
yeah, stayed in the arts.
So,
Hey, Joe and Allan, hey, thanks so very much for putting this on. Really great selection, and I have a passion for Irish whiskey. I think it's the best thing that's out there, and just keep doing what you're doing. And again, much thanks.
No, of course. Michael, is that a record collection?
That's a piece of a record collection.
No, that's a comic book collection.
That's actually comic books, but
Oh, cool. Yeah.
there's about 1,000 pieces of vinyl in the next room. And I'm up at my friend's case. This is our smoking and whiskey den. And so after we're done, we're going to slap on some vinyl, and we're going to have to downshift to Lestow because I'm too lazy to go downstairs and grab my bottle of 18.
Oh, man. Michael, you and I could nerd out at my desk right now. I didn't move. Is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comic of the Ronin? So I do love comics too. That's funny that you have a whole wall of comics. Big fan.
It's not mine. It's my buddy Casey's here, and he has a collection that's almost museum quality of Marvel and you name it.
Wow, I love that. That's so cool. Yeah, vinyl does rule. Carrie, I love vinyl. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Joe, within your own portfolio, what is your go-to whiskey?
My go-to whiskey, oh man, that's such a tough question, and I get versions of that question. Like if you had one drink before you died, one drink on an island, it would depend on where I am. But for the sake of making the question less difficult, I would say my go-to that I grab the most, that I've had to get the most, is probably Redbreast 15.
Okay, thank you.
I have so many though, and I also have like a pretty cool bourbon collection, and I drink all kinds of stuff. I love really fun rums. But out of our portfolio, what I tend to grab myself and pour over a cube or maybe with a splash of water is going to be Redbreast.
And what's your favorite whiskey cocktail then?
Oh,
Sorry.
probably. No, that's a good question too. It is fun to. The way that if you were to line up a bunch of whiskeys and then put a splash of water in them and kind of see what happens to them. I also think of an old fashioned as a good way to gauge a spirit too, because I have a recipe that I make every time and all I'm changing is the whiskey. So it's cool to see how different whiskeys stand up in an old fashioned. But my favorite cocktail of all time actually is the Tipperary. It has been for a long time. And that's Irish whiskey, green chartreuse, sweet vermouth, and a little dash of orange bitters. I have a chartreuse tattoo on my leg. Big fan of chartreuse. And that's just one of my favorite cocktails of all time.
Awesome.
Hey, Joe, real quick, can you comment on the PX?
Yeah, in regards to,
that's one of my go-tos. I just think bang for the buck. If you get it at the right price, it's amazing sherry bomb.
Sure.
And
so in the, I guess I didn't really touch on that. I did talk about the sherry triangle. The sherry triangle is where you have to grow the white grape varietal that will go on to become Amontillado, Oloroso. If you Fino and Palo Cortado. That's called Vino Generoso, general wine. Outside of the triangle, there are different kinds of wine called Vino Dolce. And as you guys know, Dolce is sweet, sweeter wines. Instead of juicing the grape and then fermenting the juice, you sun dry the grape, which is going to start to look like a raisin. And then which means the sugars inside of it are naturally getting concentrated. And then you extract the sugar from said raisin instead of juicing the grape and introducing it to fermentation. So it starts sweeter. So the Pedro Jimenez and the Muscatel grape are two of the most famous Vino Dolces. And then there's another category called Vino Liqueur, and that's where cream sherry falls into play. And Redbreast 18 is port, cream sherry, Oloroso, and ex-bourbon. So 4 barrels, 3 different kinds of wine going into Redbreast 18. So PX essentially is just dehydrating the grape naturally in the sun, getting concentrated sugars, and then using those sugars for fermentation to become wine, to become a sweet wine.
Can I ask a kind of a branding marketing question? Just that I notice Powers specifically seems to have significantly less presence in terms of like both of those things. Is there any reason for that? Like, you know, if I look on the website or if I've been to the stores, there's like a keychain and a shirt, but there's a million Jameson things, and there's, you know, you can get a tumbler for everything else but Powers.
I'm not sure.
I think that would just be just a prioritization thing from a organizational standpoint. I mean, candidly, like the prize of the bit of Jameson is just that much bigger globally than the other brands, so they tend to get a bit of special attention and more resources because of that. So
it's okay, Griffin. If the people that know that if you're in the Powers Club, you're the cool kid.
Well, I have my collection. I've got old glasses and everything, but
cool.
It'd be nice to buy something that wasn't 30 years old.
It's all vintage Power stuff. Yeah.
If it got too popular, it would lose some of its coolness. So it's kind of
it really is like the drink of the local, of like, you know, that's kind of what it was when you look back. They came around a little bit after Jameson, only not too long, but they were kind of like the drink of the working man. You know, Powers was famously like the drink of the working man, and Jameson had this level of prestige to this luxury element to it. It was older, it was bottled older, and it like had this like just a different cut to it than the oily, robust, you know, pot still distillate that Powers was. But I do love Powers. The U.S. is interesting, you know, so you have different sales reps and different sales teams for everything. So the way all those things work can get convoluted. But I am a big fan too. I wish there was more swag of Powers, because I mean, look, this was I'm sitting on it right here. Yeah, my opening sip was Powers. The juice.
What was the favorite amongst those of you who are left today? I'm just curious of the lineup. Did anyone have a favorite of this lineup?
The 21.
Okay.
The Redbreast 21.
21 still holds up, and the Crockett still holds up. But the 18 took me by surprise now that I'm comparing it with everything else.
Yeah.
I'd say the Crockett was my favorite for today.
I think Crockett too.
I think the 18
Crockett and
or the
21.
Moscatel.
Yeah, my favorite was the Crockett, which I don't drink enough
Look
of.
at all you guys with expensive taste. Most expensive one there. It's like $500 a bottle. Yeah.
That's why, like, I think part of it is because of that. You don't drink it as often, so when you do, you're like, wow, this is really good.
Like, whoa, yeah.
True. You mentioned before about batches. I'm sorry, you're talking about batches and how 27 they were noticeably different. I just have the one, and it's unbelievable. Is Crockett similar, or no? Is Crockett like a 12 where it's made to be the same each time?
Crockett is made to be,
because I've had 3 different ones, and to me they seem the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
I aspire to have another bottle of 27 to compare it to my other batch. Well,
I know.
We'll see how that works out.
I bet you could get lucky. Like, you know, I get to travel the country for this job, and then sometimes I get to find myself in like a tertiary market or something. And I love going into the liquor store of a town that isn't populated like Chicago, and there's always cool stuff on the shelf, and I end up finding some pretty good deals. We're coming across like a rare bourbon or a fun Irish whiskey that I have, sometimes at a good price too.
Yeah.
I came across a red spot for like $169 one time, and I was like, whoa, awesome.
See, that's the regular price in New York now. It was 300 for years, but now
Is it really?
the blue, no joke. I'm in New York City. I'm in North Jersey. They're obviously the demand is coming down, but
wow.
Yellow spot is 99 in Total Wine, and Total Wine usually is way overpriced. Total Wine has the red spot for $2.99, but I guess relative to demand in a given store. But within 5 miles, maybe there's 2 places selling it for under $175.
Yeah, in North Carolina it is rough. I hear you. So I have designed a few bars in Asheville, North Carolina, and man, working with that ABC system to try to put together a cool inventory was rough. Special order everything, and like the taxes you have to pay, like it's like the only state that I can think of where if you are a bar or a restaurant, you have to pay more per bottle instead of getting a break. Like typically at a restaurant or bar, you get, if you buy more, you get a break. But in North Carolina, you pay $3.75, I believe, per bottle just because for every single bottle at your bar, which is changes.
You're lucky to find that bottle.
Changes the P&L drastically if you're opening a bar in North Carolina. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're
That's
lucky
why you
we
have
have
to
a
go
few really nice ones.
Yeah, you got to go to Hank's house because he doesn't charge that much for a bottle.
Perfect.
What
Are you
are
in
the
Charlotte, Tracy?
I'm in Raleigh. Yeah, just
In
outside
Raleigh.
of Raleigh.
Cool. I was just in Charlotte 2 weeks ago. We did an event with some pretty cool tea bars there. Forêt de Trancé, one of the few bottles in the States. I got one of those bottles into Charlotte, and one of those bottles now lives at Vintage, which has a lot of our high-end Irish whiskey next time you're in Charlotte.
Okay.
It's beautiful cocktail.
Yeah, it won't be long. I'll be there soon. Yeah, we have a tournament coming up.
There are some great Irish pubs in Charlotte.
There are.
There are,
really
yeah.
are.
Connolly's, yeah.
Connolly's, and then out in Waxhaw now, the guys from Connolly's opened Mary O'Neill's that's out there, and then they opened one in Ballantyne, Nora Max.
Yeah.
Those are the best ones there.
Yeah. What are the chances of getting some more of the small batches in the US?
For
which small batch?
Yeah, like the series that they created that were the US exclusives for the different stores. Are those coming back potentially one day?
Are you talking about the Redbreasts?
Yeah, the Redbreast small batches that they made.
Yeah,
Where they
that's
had like
it's
the
been a
A, B,
minute.
C, and D.
Yeah, that's been a minute. Yeah, San Francisco had one. Was it?
It was
that-
Boston. Boston and
Yeah.
California had them.
Yeah, California and then Boston had
Yeah.
four of the batches. So you had A, B, and C and D between different stores, and
Yeah,
they
I
were
got to try
fantastic.
those at a whiskey event one time. Some guy surprised me and brought some stuff from home, and I hadn't tried those before, and I got to try both of them side by side. It was pretty neat.
That's
a
what
good
I just
question.
poured. Little bit of the Julios
Yeah.
and Redstone.
I do know that we're flirting with, I don't know how much I can disclose or how long it's going to take to do this, but I do we are flirting single barrel program. So maybe down the road we'll allow liquor stores or hotels or groups like yourselves to get a barrel of something, but it's still kind of in its infancy because for now that stays kind of over there, as you guys know. A lot of pubs, a lot of hotels have their own barrel of Redbreast or something. So hopefully one day it does make its way here. As I do think the Irish whiskey category is growing. It's the fastest growing category amongst all of the categories, which is pretty cool for us. Redbreast especially, it's the most awarded pot whiskey. Midleton, as of last year, is now the most awarded international distillery. And not to mention, aside from whiskey, Ireland's like having a moment. The Oscars, the Grammys, like the music and the actors they're putting out. So maybe we'll see Ireland continue to kind of kill it, and hopefully that turns into more stuff coming for us to drink. But I guess we'll see.
Well, we're trying to wear you down, Joe.
Yeah.
The latest direct flight is actually Raleigh to Dublin. So if you want to do a collaboration in Raleigh, you'll have a good gang of us here.
Oh yeah.
Get Aer Lingus on board.
Yeah. Jameson and I are taking 15 lucky people to Ireland in 2 weeks. Yeah, May 10th. Yeah. We're taking
awesome.
people from all over the place. Dead Rabbit, I'm sure you guys have heard of Dead Rabbit on the Lower East Side. Jack Rose in DC, and then some other people across the country are coming over with us. But
nice.
Gonna get a little nerdy with some whiskey, hang out with the guys. But
Yeah.
What would you recommend, like with your education and like career trajectory? I've been a distiller for 4.5, 5 years ish.
Mhm.
And I'm
Oh,
looking
cool.
to, I want to
Yeah, what's
continue
up?
to be involved. Unfortunately, the industry right now is a little bit rough.
Oh, what are we grilling?
Pork chops and rigid pot.
Like, what would you recommend in terms of like
marinated,
education or like steps to take to
Okay.
continue to be involved in the industry?
yeah, no, that's a great question. I guess you're already distilling. Do you have a distiller's degree out of like the University of Kentucky, or have you just kind of learned on the job?
I was just kind of really annoying. I'm lucky. I'm in Portland, which is the highest density of independent distilleries in any major city in the U.S. They're all pretty small, but it just means I was able to be annoying to enough people for long enough that they gave me jobs.
Yeah.
But again, right now, like the place that I'd been the longest, laid off their whole production staff. Like it's been a whole thing.
Oh man.
But like, well, what do I do now when it seems to be harder to be actively part of it? Like, what steps would be good to take to try and like maintain kind of like a resume?
Yeah, I would definitely get into the history and like educational side of it if you don't already have. Like the WSET is pretty standardized across the country, pretty accoladed to have on your resume or on even in your email signature if you have a high level at WSET. The Irish Whiskey Academy, it's pretty tough to take in court. So most take the Edinburgh Whiskey Academy, and it's only a couple $100, not too bad. Just as hard. Just you don't have to be in person; you can take it virtually. So I would probably just continue to be curious. You know, that sounds like a bummer. I'm sorry to hear that, but like keep being passionate about what you like and stay curious. And I would think that we're going to see a turn at some point. I do think the smaller micro level of distilling and brewing is probably going to be hurt for a while in the wineries, but maybe there's a place for you at a larger level distillery. Like, you said you're Portland, Maine or Portland, Oregon?
Oregon.
Oh, cool. Oh, I have a Redbreast dinner at Multnomah Library on June 15th. You should come.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Do they serve food at this Redbreast dinner, or is it just Redbreast?
No, it's going to be a really nice, like high-end course meal. But remind me in the WhatsApp chat. I'll get you a seat. I have a couple tickets that I have to give out. So come hang out. That'd be cool.
Sounds
I
good.
should mention, just in case anyone missed that up front, Joe is a member. So if you're on the WhatsApp chat group, you can reach him there. If you're not on that, I encourage you to join in or just reach out. We can get you the contact info for people.
How do we get into the chat? I must have missed that at some point.
Okay.
Just shoot me an email that you want. I'll shoot you the invite. It was part of the when you joined type of thing. You got the invite link, but I can resend it to you. Just let me know.
I mean, there should be bonus kudos for agreeing to do this after being in the chat with us all already.
Yeah. Yeah.
Might be the last time, Kian. So.
Hey, Joe, you mentioned that the 2023 MVR was 80% pot still, sounds pretty high. I have the 2020, which I thought just from searching was somewhat high, and they are similar. I know 2021 definitely seemed like more grain. I know they're not published things, but do you know what the 2020 was? I believe last year of.
I would have to go look. It's not something that we put into writing. It's something that I would have had in my.
No. Yeah, agreed.
But it's all. I don't think there's anything lower than 75 in the last decade. 75% pot still.
Really?
So it just varies. The 75-25 is going to vary. But what you could be picking up on is maybe there was second fill of the barley, of the pot still distillate in there, but first fill of, the corn distillate. So maybe the corn in the whiskey barrel is interacting stronger than the barley in a whiskey barrel. But there really is so many freaking recipes you can make. Like, I can't imagine, like, And you could even do third, or you could do virgin American oak for like a quick little finish to add some tannins in there with virgin American oak or virgin European oak. Like it really is endless, the amount of recipes you can make in whiskey.
Yeah, it's tough to pour 3 or 4 of them and compare them.
Yeah.
But I'll do the work. I'll do the work for everyone.
It is tough, especially of the same line. Like when I try the different Redbreast 12 cask strengths side by side, it's so hot. It's so tiny. The difference is so tiny. And to have that palate is pretty crazy. But no, the master blender is such an unsung hero and often overlooked. But their job is really tough. They not only have to have the palate, that refined palate. I've gotten to go in there. Thankfully, luckily, very few people have gotten to go in the master blender room. You have to change your outfit. You look like you're on a hazmat site with a hard hat and a covered jacket and gloves, and you have to change your shoes. And then you go into the first room, and then there's an air-sealed room in the second room where all the smelling and the sipping happens in an airtight room. Not only do you do all that as a master blender, and you keep all of our brands consistent, they also are in charge of projections. And at Midleton, we project 60 years into the future because we have a lot of age statements and we have a lot of big brands. So it takes that long of a projection to make sure that we're on top of production and on top of innovation. So unsung hero, the Mac blenders, there's 3 of them. They have to have 50% of them is a perfect palette and 50% of them is like a freak at math and spreadsheets. And it's just a crazy job. And they're all like the kindest, like warmest people to be around. Like you wouldn't know how stressful their job is by talking to them. But man, what a crazy job.
Well, if they want to retire and suggest some replacements, I'm sure there's 20 people on this call that would.
Right. I don't know if any of us have the palate for it as much as we drink whiskey. But...
No, not even close. That's why I'm trying to compare 2 vintages of they're different, but right? I don't know.
I have to put hot sauce on everything these days just to feel something, No. But as far as the roadmap goes, I'm not sure. And you know what? Part of me wonders, because I've hung out with these guys now a few times, if I can just picture these guys sitting around dinner, sharing a meal, fireplace is going, they got a couple whiskeys, and it wouldn't surprise me if these guys just kind of come up with it on the fly. What is batch going to be like? You know what? Good question. Pass the wine. And they're just like kind of talking and chatting. It wouldn't surprise me if that's how some of these things come to life, because they really are all just easygoing, nice people over there with the best jobs. Of course, there's some purpose to it and science behind it all too. But I wonder if the ideating starts fairly casual and then they build out what that roadmap looks like as it becomes more serious. But that's kind of, at least I'd like
Joe, I'm thinking that if they're doing it that way, that might be why we don't have any formal roadmaps, because they're doing it
the beginning.
When they're just drinking, they get the end result and they like it, but they don't remember how they got there.
Well, if 27 is the minimum cask, I'm going to guess it's not 2.3 million. They're down to just so many casks, right? They can only blend. That's got to be a part of it outside of the a problem I'd love to have, but yeah.
Yeah. And it's 27 is the minimum. I know for a fact there is some port finish in the Redbreast 27 that's like 30, 37 years stuff. Like 27, of course, as we all know, the number is the minimum. Not like rum, where you can put a splash of 25 in your crappy rum and call it a 25. We are the opposite when it comes to rules. But yeah. Any more questions in there, guys? It's been an absolute blast and pleasure to hang with you. No? Allan, any questions you see? Anything left?
I think we covered, let's just see this one. Trying to get to nope.
Cool.
I was going to say, if there's anybody has stuff after the fact, feel free to ask in the chat or send it to me. I can get it to Joe, certainly.
The only obvious question I have is, when is the next tasting of this level? Can I sign up? Can I sign up now? And again, thank you, Allan and Joe. This is fantastic. Thank you.
In all honesty, I know there's nothing on the calendar now, but we're having some fun conversations on what innovation is looking like next year. So maybe we could do something early on when that new kind of LTO is coming out around this few months before this next year, or something along those lines. That would be pretty cool to give you guys a sneak peek at what that next
Oh,
next
yeah.
Iberian series might look like. So that could
That'd
be
be
something
cool.
we discuss
Yeah, we
down the
do a
line.
sneak peek class with these guys. That'd be fun. Yeah.
But we've got plenty of time, so Alan, we can chat around that. But yeah.
Yep. Always looking ahead to figure out what we can do. So.
Yeah. And maybe I'll squeeze someone's arm and see if I can't get, Dave McCabe or someone to come do a quick little 5-minute hello. That'd be really fun if you guys got to meet one of these guys, get him to hop on Zoom. Obviously they're 6 hours ahead of us, so we got to make sure them, and he's a new dad. He's got his second kid now, so we'll see if he can break away, but it'd be kind of neat just to have anyone kind of hop on for a second and say hi.
He's probably anyway.
Yeah.
I was going to say that.
They've been going. So there's 3 master blenders. 2 are women, and one is Dave. He's the master blender. The other 2 are kind of not really apprentice. They are just as important as him. But Dave and one of the other women have been like trading off paternity and maternity leave because they just keep having kids offset of each other. So she's had 2 and he's had 2 in the last 3 years. So they just keep taking.
So you're saying that the future of Irish whiskey is safe.
Safe, yeah. Master blenders are having kids left and right.
Good
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, I just have one cheers that I like to do on these virtual things. If you guys have any whiskey left, you guys may have heard this one before, but it is a good one, especially for new friends and hanging out together for the first time. And it's, may your glass be ever full. May the roof over your head be always strong, and may you be in heaven half an hour before the devil knows you're dead. Yeah, plancha. Yeah,
plancha.
Cheers. Look forward to seeing you guys in the wild.
Thank you again, Joe.
Thank you.
And
Thank you. Bye bye.
Have a great week. Thanks, all.
Thank you for everything. Phenomenal.
Thank you, friends. Appreciate you.